give your speech.
Good evening and welcome. Before we get started, I'd like to provide a brief review of tonight's meeting. After a few procedural items, the board will hear 30 minutes of public comment. At the end of the meeting, there will be another and final opportunity for additional public comment. So if you do not get to speak at the beginning, you can stay and speak at the end. To request to participate in public comment, click on the participants button at the bottom of your screen and select the raise your hand button to request to speak. When called upon, you will be unmuted. To comment by phone, you will be prompted to raise your hand by pressing *9. Once again, when called upon, you will be unmuted. If you want to speak, you should raise your hand now. If you wait to raise your hand until the public comment period starts, you will not get to speak and you will have to wait until the end. The board president will usually call on our students first. So if you are a student who wishes to speak, please write student at the end of your name. The board president will also determine whether to set tonight's speaking time at 1, 2, or 3 minutes per speaker and on an individual basis. He also has the discretion to allow for extra time for those who need translation or have other speech needs. When your time has elapsed, you will see Vice President Khadijah Brown holding a sign letting you know that you have 15 seconds left. If you are still speaking, finish your sentence. Please try not to speak beyond your time. Thank you. Voy a proporcionarles un breve resumen detallando el orden de esta reunión. Después de unos procedimientos preliminares, un periodo de media hora será dedicado a comentarios públicos. Al final de la junta, que usualmente puede ser cerca de las 10, habrá una segunda y última oportunidad para quienes desean participar en comentario público y no lo pudieron hacer durante la primera llamada. Para comentar por videoconferencia, haga clic en el botón participantes en la parte de abajo de su pantalla y seleccione el botón levantar la mano o raise your hand. Al ser llamado, le van a permitir hablar 1, 2 o 3 minutos, dependiendo la decisión del presidente. Después del tiempo asignado, lo volverán a silenciar. Para comentar por teléfono, por favor, levante la mano presionando *9. Una vez más, al ser llamado, le permitirán hablar. Usualmente el presidente llamará a los estudiantes primero, si hay estudiantes que desean hablar esta noche, por favor de indicar que son estudiantes al escribir estudiante después de su nombre. Cuando haya transcurrido su tiempo, cuando haya transcurrido su tiempo, la vicepresidenta Khadijah Brown enseñará un papel indicando que le faltan 15 segundos. Por favor, termine su oración.
Liz, your microphone went out there at the end.
What was the last thing you heard?
Vice President Khadijah Brown is going to hold up the paper to tell.
Ok, por favor termine su oración, pero trate de no sobrepasarse su tiempo. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Vice President.
Thank you. And can you, welcome everybody. Welcome to the February 3rd meeting of the school board. Of the open session, I'm calling it to order at 7 o'clock. Ms. Charis, can you please call the roll?
Director Ana Vasudev.
Presente.
Student Director Miles Miller.
Present.
Director Laura Babbitt.
Here.
Director Julie Sinai.
Here.
Vice President Khadijah Brown.
Present.
President Ty Alper.
Present. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to explain what I'm going to say a few words about the meeting tonight and explain Dr. Stevens' absence in a minute. But first, let's approve the agenda for tonight. So can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Miller. Can you take the roll, please?
Director Vasudev.
Approve, yes.
Director Babbitt.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Director Sinai.
Yes.
Vice President Brown.
Yes.
President Alper.
Yes. Okay, and Director Calise, I assume you heard there that we approved the agenda and didn't pull anything from consent.
I did.
Okay. So thank you everybody for coming tonight. I wanted to thank you for taking the time to be with us. I think foremost on everyone's mind in the district, and of course, our highest priority right now is the challenge of reopening our schools. More than 1,000 people attended the superintendent's discussion about school reopening last week, and I wanted to make sure that everyone knows, and the district will send out more information about this, but Dr. Stevens has scheduled another dedicated session on school reopening for next week. It'll be on Thursday at 8 o'clock. So I hope that everyone who's here tonight to speak or to hear about that issue will tune in on Thursday at 8 o'clock and attend that session. Tonight, the board discussed union negotiations in closed session before the meeting, before the open session of the meeting, and we will be recessing back to closed session after the open session tonight to continue those discussions. Dr. Stevens was going to give an update on where things were with reopening tonight. Unfortunately, he had a family emergency and can't be with us tonight. So we wish him well, and I wanted to let people know that our superintendent won't be with us for the meeting tonight, and so and ask that you all bear with us as we sort of work our way through the agenda without the superintendent. And again, to note that next Thursday at 8 o'clock, he will be having a dedicated session on reopening, information session, and opportunity to ask and have questions answered. So thank you for everyone's patience with that. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Vice President Brown for her to report on our closed session.
Thank you, President Alper. Closed session began at 5:30 p.m. with all board directors present. For item 3.1.1, is moved by Director Brown, myself, seconded by Director Sinai, and the motion passed 5-0. For item 3.2, the board provided direction. For item 3.3.1 and item 3.3.2, the conversations have been tabled to the second part of closed session.
Great. Thank you, Vice President Brown. Okay, now we are moving right along to our public comment period. I should have mentioned this before. If you're here to give public comment, now is the time to raise your hand so that we know how many people are here for public comment. And we have 30 minutes allotted. And we have many people now who have raised their hand. So we're going, in order to accommodate everybody, which we'd like to do, we're going to limit the comment to 1 minute each. So please start adjusting your comments now so that we can fit in everybody if we keep it to 1 minute each. If you don't get a chance to speak now, we'll have another public comment period at the end of the open session. Once we start the public comment period, people who raise their hand once we start won't get an opportunity to speak in the first public comment session, but can stick around and speak at the public comment session at the end of the meeting. But we need to cut it off at the people who have raised their hand by the time we start, so that we know how many people are there to speak, and that we can get everybody and that we can move along to the discussion and action items that we have tonight. So I'm going to start the public comment session now. Vice President Brown, 1 minute each. When as Ms. Chira said, Vice President Brown will raise up a sign that says 15 seconds left, and then that your time is up. Please just finish your sentence at the end of the time so that we get an opportunity to hear from everybody within the 30 minutes. Okay. So the people who have raised their hands as of now will be able to speak. I know that you all in the public can't see the list that we can see, but the last person on the list is Justin Lehrer. So anybody who signs up after Justin Lehrer can stick around and speak in the second public comment period. Okay, so we're going to start now 1 minute each with Sarah Donaldson, followed by Chris Piper. And then, yeah, okay, start with Sarah Donaldson.
Hi there. Thank you, dear school board. I'm Sarah Donaldson, a parent at Rosa Parks Elementary and King Middle. And I just would like to speak up for the Office of Family Equity and Engagement. I really hope that this year's budget can include enough money to have a family engagement specialist at each of our elementary schools, so they don't have to split their time between different campuses. I think it's super important since so many folks are having a hard time, and those folks are the people who build our communities and make our schools like homes. I'm super excited to see that maybe we might have one at each of the middle schools too. So hooray, I hope you guys can keep that idea. Thanks for your good work.
Thank you, Ms. Donaldson. Next, we have Chris Piper and then Luan Neo.
Yeah, hi, can you hear us?
Yep.
Hi, this is Chris Piper. I'm a Berkeley parent. I'm here with my son Fletcher, who's a freshman at Berkeley High, who'd like to say a few words about reopening.
Hi, my name's Fletcher, and I just really think we just need to reopen as soon as possible. All my friends feel the same way. It's such a struggle learning online and dealing with, not being able to ask questions as much. And, some of my friends are getting really bad grades, even though they're super smart kids. They worked super hard since kindergarten, and we're all, feeling it. We're all super disconnected from each other. So many of my friends, I basically not my friends anymore. I haven't seen them in forever. I haven't seen people in almost a full year. And yeah, we just need to reopen as soon as possible.
And with the extra time, I'd like to very respectfully thank the board for allowing my son to speak. I'd also like to suggest that we set a date for reopening. And I would like to propose a date of April 12th, which was the Monday after spring break. Thanks.
Thank you both. Luan Neo and then Manny Lane Scott will be next.
Hi, thank you for giving me the time. My name is Luana. I'm a mom to a first grader at Rosa Parks and also to a preschooler who goes to school 5 days a week with her mask on at 3 years old. So it's very possible. This is my first time making public comment. So for months, I've been patiently waiting and listening to these meetings. I'm super understanding and supportive. However, after 11 months of being in this situation, there's still no clear plan to reopening schools anytime soon, nor an explicit commitment that all schools will reopen in the fall. And we're really starting to reach a breaking point here. So if others can do it, why can't we? There are no more excuses not to do it. It's really becoming a question of either deep unwillingness or severe incompetence at this moment. So I really urge you to make a plan towards school reopening 5 days per week to all students who want to, from elementary to high school. Do it together with us, with the community. We are willing to do like fundraise for tents, change teachers. Hell, I would even clean bathrooms if that is required for us to return to school. So just to say, we're here to support, but we're looking at you to lead. Thank you.
Thank you. Manny Lane Scott, followed by Isaiah Fairchild. Manny Lane Scott. Hello? Manny Lane Scott, can you,
Hello.
Yep, we can hear you.
Good evening, school board and Berkeley Unified staff. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all tonight. My name is Manuel Lane Scott, or you can all call me Manny. I'm an 8th grade student at King Middle School. I love King. I love being there, but right now it's not safe. Over 400,000 people in the U.S. have died of COVID. Other school districts have tried to return and it didn't work out for them because other students and teachers got COVID. Shouldn't we all have the vaccine first? Kids with special needs are most vulnerable, and so are Black and brown people. My twin brother, Anthony, has a compromised immune system. He gets sick really easily. If he got COVID, he would end up in the hospital or worse. Can you please think all about that?
Thank you, Manny. Appreciate it. Next, we have another student, Isaiah Fairchild, followed by Matt Weber.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me. Hi, I'm Isaiah Fairchild, a senior at Berkeley High. Thanks for the opportunity to share and have a voice. I wanted to talk tonight to share what I've seen in terms of mental and physical health of kids, as well as bring up some questions. Kids are suffering, not from the virus, but from being isolated from their peers and not being able to go to school or play sports. Kids are suffering because we depend on all of those things. They're essential. School is essential. Engaging in those activities is how kids develop for all of us. But I just think about 5-year-old kids doing online school, not in person, not interacting with their peers and teachers in person, not learning or beginning to learn how to be successful in the school environment and social environments. I just can't help but think about how those early educational years shaped who I am in the classroom and socially today. Our youth are our future. We are seeing some of the long-term effects from not going to school already, being with the increased suicide rates among the youth and 3 to 4 million increase in the amount of calls to the youth helpline in our state, not to mention the huge decline in physical and mental health for not being able to play sports and be active. Obesity and diabetes rates in kids having spiked since lockdowns in March last year. Schools keep kids alive. It keeps many kids off the streets and in the classroom, especially with sports gone at the high school level. There's been an increase in dropouts, ineligibility across the state, gang affiliation, incarceration, and crime. We need to start putting the kids first. Where's the line? How many suicides, how many dropouts, how many kids, children admitted to Children's Hospital for mental episodes is it gonna take to put us first? I just hope that we can have a date to go back to school soon, because it's saddening how much kids are suffering because of not being able to go back to school. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Weber, followed by another student, Lucas.
Good evening, school board. Thank you for this time. I wanted to share some great news and a word of thanks. Great news, we're underneath the threshold for being able to open, so we can open schools ASAP, and ASAP means in 5 days from yesterday, as I understand. Additionally, I want to thank the school board for previously unequivocally saying that the schools should open as soon as possible. As soon as possible is now. As you know, public health officer, the mayor, and several city council people have stated that opening schools is one of their top priorities because of the short and long-term learning loss, racial inequities that are being exacerbated, and mental and physical health impacts to our children. The superintendent has determined that it is safe through his dashboard, and the only thing that's in the way are union negotiations. So I strongly urge you to pick a specific date, and I recommend February 16th. It's coming up. It's allowed, and I urge you to go to come with a plan where you're going to school 5 days a week and for 4 hours a day, as other school districts have been able to do successfully. Please show the leadership and give a specific date and goal for everybody to work towards: teachers, parents, unions, and superintendent. Thank you.
Mr. Weber. All right, next we have Lucas, and I'm going to ask everybody to please keep your comments to 1 minute. When you see Vice President Brown, hold up the time's up sign. There it is. Please wrap up your sentence, your last sentence, so that we can hear from everybody. Lucas, go ahead.
Can you hear us?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Lucas.
Hi, my name is Lucas. I'm 10 years old and I'm a 4th grader at Oxford. Schools have been closed for almost a year now. A year may not seem like a big deal to you, but for me, it's 1/10 of my life. I know how to wear a mask, I wash my hands often, and I'm old enough to keep physical distance. I want to be in school every morning and learn together with my teacher and classmates. Please open our schools now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Thanks for being here with us tonight. Next, we have Katie Love, followed by M. Kane.
Hello, school board. Good evening. My name is Katie Love. I'm a parent at Washington Elementary. I want to thank all of the students who spoke today. I'm really amazed at your leadership and was brought to tears more than once. Now that we are below the state threshold, we must reopen elementary schools now. We can do so safely for the protection of all our community. The USD have met all facility requirements and upgrades. Every day, as our students have told us, children in public schools in Berkeley are suffering, and every day we needlessly delay has a huge cost to them. So I ask each of you as directors, as representatives and leaders in our community to move with the urgency and leadership shown by Director Babbitt. Thank you so much, Director Babbitt. Finally, I want to thank our incredible BUSD teachers and staff for all you do every single day for our children. We are all in this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Love. Now we have M. Kane, followed by Rohini Har.
Hello.
Yep, we can hear you.
Hello, this is Michelle Kane. I'm a parent of a first grader at Rosa Parks, and I'd like to address the reopening issue as well. I would like to ask why it is that preschools right here in Berkeley, educating children from all backgrounds, including children of essential workers, have been operating safely since the summer with no significant outbreaks. And is it really the position of those opposing opening elementary schools now that a 4-year-old can be safe at school, but when that child turns 5, he or she cannot? And if so, what is the evidence that supports that position? Because the reality right now for every Berkeley parent is that we see that the people who can afford to pay can go to school in person, but the people who cannot can't have school. Our children are suffering, and this cannot go on. Please, we are begging you, keep distance learning for those who need it. We heard comments today for those who do, but bring all the other kids back now.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kane. Rohini Har, followed by Mike Schwartz.
Thank you, school board. Thank you, Mr. Alper. I am a BUSD parent of 2 children at John Muir Elementary. I am also an emergency medicine doctor in Oakland, California. Earlier this week, I and more than 130 health professionals wrote you a letter stressing what we are seeing more and more among our patients and what the science has told us. Briefly, our letter highlights 3 points. 1, the science and the data shows that schools can open safely. 2, there is a mental health crisis and a physical health crisis that now outweighs the risk of COVID. 3, we implore you to make concrete progress to reopen the schools. This is based on science and on our collective experience every day in the East Bay. I hope that all of you have a chance to read that letter, and I hope that you will respond soon with these steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Schwartz, followed by Michael Chang.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you all. Here's how I see it. We're at the crossroads, guys. Distance learning is akin to the difference between going to a U2 concert and experiencing that concert, or listening to crackling FM radio where the songs cut in and out constantly. It is incomparable. It is not learning. And COVID is going to be here forever. No one is debating this. We are talking about a risk factor that is never going away. So we are deciding right now whether or not you are moving forward with public education in person or never having public education in person again, because that is what is happening. The risk factors that are there for fires, earthquakes, active shooter drills, horrible, terrible things go on with risk factors, but we deal with it because school matters, and in-person school matters. And our children need to be able to stop staring at screens all day long with squares and get back with their teachers and their friends. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Mike Chang, followed by Julian.
Thank you. I'm a parent in the district, a kid in high school and one in 8th grade. I also am on the PTA Council as well as a commissioner on the Police Review Commission, although I'm speaking on behalf of myself as a individual. Thank you for all the hard work, school board. I know this is a very complex issue. You're grappling with a lot of complex issues. Total kudos to the kids too for the bravery in exercising their speech rights. I just want to flag related equity issues as we move through the complicated issue of when and how to open the school. For the English language master plan, I strongly urge the board to consider hiring a consultant to ensure not only best practices, but compliance with the law. And secondly, we still have this issue of regarding ethnic studies in the K through 12. I think in terms of equity, the bigger picture as we move forward and we grapple with this important issue that you are currently dealt with, it's important to consider how we teach our students with regard to respect for each other and open spaces and conversations such as this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. Julian, followed by Catherine Winarski.
Hi, my name's Julian Waldo, and my son Emery's here, wants to say a couple words.
I'm Emery. I'm in first grade at Ruth Acti. This learning is very hard because I can't hear and I don't know what's going on sometimes, and there's glitches.
And I'm going to jump in. I have another son who's in TK at Ruth Acti. He has literally never seen his class in person. He's never been to school in person. He had his 100th day of school celebration, which really wasn't a 100th day of school, it was a 100th day of computer learning. And I think that we need to show some urgency in this district. I think the leadership needs to step up and set a firm date for school to reopen so that we can get all these kids back in school. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Thank you, Emery. Catherine Winarski, followed by Shalene Stein.
Hi, my name is Catherine Winarski. I'm a parent of an Emerson student, a first grader and an incoming kindergartner. I'm here to voice support in opening schools for in-person learning in a robust fashion as soon as possible. Science and experience in other districts definitely points to safety, that the schools can open safely. And honestly, we're at breaking point with two young kids going to be in public school next year. Our confidence is completely dented. We are exploring what other options that we have. We're considering a move out of Berkeley after 6 years, which we don't want to do. We're considering private school, which we can't afford, but we feel like it's our concern is so strong with two young kids in school. We don't feel like we've got any options. You're not giving us any confidence in next year. This year is somewhat salvageable. It's safe now to open. The numbers are good. Please open as soon as possible for the sake of our young kids. It's so important. It's critical. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shalene Stein, followed by Mark Joseph Ramia.
Good evening, school board. I am the parent of a kindergartner at Rosa Parks. I'm in tears listening to these kids say the same thing my son has been saying all year. I'd like to open with words of Rosa Parks, whose birthday is tomorrow, and said, I don't believe in gradualism or that whatever is to be done for the better should take forever to do. Rather than simply naming our schools after our heroes, let's follow their words and example. Your own data demonstrate that virtual learning is failing many children and families in this district. It is past time to create an in-person learning option for those children and families. You received a letter yesterday from over 130 Berkeley health care professionals, communicating the urgency with which we need to reopen schools and emphasizing that we have met CDPH guidelines for our elementary classrooms. Parents and teachers stand together in our concerns about the hybrid model. It requires every teacher to return to in-person interaction while simultaneously coordinating labor-intensive distance instruction for their full class. We love our teachers. We know how hard this has been. I urge you to reconsider your model and allow teachers and families both willing to return to do so imminently.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mark Joseph Ramia, followed by Jonas Lamattery Brownell. Mark Joseph.
BHS IAPP Mark Ramia here. I want to mention something that the BHS classified employees are dealing with. past BCCE President Lynette Robinson had conversation halted by the district over the new calendar. It took several meetings just to get the right titles and salary ranges under the correct headings. While a decision was made to move forward with the calendar by the district in agreement with Berkeley Federation of Teachers, no thought was given by the administration to how that would affect the 10-month classified employees. Past President Lynette Robinson understood that the shift causes some financial harm. During the past July and August, we didn't have medical deduction from our pay, but with the calendar shift, it would work better to have the deductions from August through to May. We're scheduled to close school on the 5th of June, 2021. Assistant Supervisor Samantha Tobias Espinosa told Lynette she would look into this matter. Samantha did not come back to the table with the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonas Lamadere Brownell, followed by Noriega Aguilar.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonas Lametri Brownell. I am BUSD's Herrick Hospital teacher, serving 6th to 12th grade psychiatric hospitalized adolescents, including fully through this time. To save lives, we must reach out fully and safely to all those suffering mental health crises, and we must drive down community spread of COVID-19 at the very least to 2.5 to 5 new transmissions per 100,000 population per day before reopening schools, no matter what masking, testing, distancing, and other safety precautions and procedures are in place, says world-renowned Dr. Ali Khan, epidemiologist, father of young children, pediatrician, former director of the CDC's Office of Public Health Preparedness and Response, and so on. And this independent voice says that, but we're right now at 30 in Alameda County. We're not anywhere close to 2.5 to 5. We're at 30. It's not safe to do that. We must save lives above all.
Thank you. Thank you. And just a reminder that we're going to call on everybody now whose hand was raised when we started public comment. And if you raise your hand after we started, then you'll be able to speak at our second public comment period at the end of the meeting. Our last public comment speaker for this period will be Justin Lehrer. Okay, Noriega Aguilar, followed by Angela Jernigan.
Hello, good evening. My name is Noriega Aguilar. I have 2 children at Silvia Mendez School, one in 1st grade, one in 3rd grade, and my youngest son is going to TK this next year. I am part of the ELAC and the DLAC committee, and I am here today as a parent representative at Silvia Mendez to advocate on the master plan for English learners and the needs of the bilingual program at Silvia Mendez and Longfellow. My children are completely bilingual thanks to the work of the teachers at Silvia Mendez. They not only speak, but read and write in both languages. I would like to express my support for the funding being considered tonight to support a meaningful community engagement process for the revision of the EL master plan. However, something the community has been asking for years since the two-way immersion programs were consolidated into one single elementary school is, what is our district's vision for dual language learners? It matters for our children that our district and our schools have a clear vision and goals for supporting language learners, not just to comply with the law, but because we value bilingualism.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Angela Jernigan, followed by Bree Fulton.
Hi there, my name is Reverend Angela Jernigan. I have an 8th grader at Willard, and I work closely with many of our district's very vulnerable families through the Voices Against Violence program. And I just wanted to speak on behalf of the Office of Family Engagement and Equity and keep them front and center as you're making budgeting considerations this spring. I have observed up close firsthand the incredible safety net that the OFE staff can put under the most vulnerable families in our district. I have watched them walk families through every kind of situation that has really become more dire and more traumatic over the last 9 months. And we're at a time when we need them more than ever. So I'm asking that you fully fund them, including the management level positions, so that so that the OFI can continue to engage community-based partners like Voices Against Violence in meeting the needs of the most vulnerable. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bree Fulton, followed by Greta Graham.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, board, and all the speakers before me. We are calling in, we're parents of a current Rosa Parks second grader and an incoming kindergartner. We very much support these schools opening as quickly as possible. And one thing we'd like to put on mention is that we'd like to hear about the leadership and the commitments that the board's making, and not avoid that because the superintendent isn't here. We want to see your leadership in getting us out of this mess and getting our schools open. Secondly, we'd like to comment that the hybrid model is really untenable for most parents. It's more risky. It did offer a solution possibly with the existing staff force that you have, but a model where you can have kids in full time would be much better. And the science seems to indicate that that's possible. Make distance learning a backup, not the main model. Thank you.
Thank you. Greta Graham, followed by Jackie Irby.
Hi, my name is Greta Graham, and I am a student who will be going into 9th grade at Berkeley High School, and it is crucial for high schools to open. Not only is online school affecting our education and grades, but also our mental health. We have already been doing online school since March, and we cannot sit around and wait any longer. As a student who is struggling with having online school, it has taken a toll on my mental health and the mental health of everyone around me. A young student should not have to carry around the weight of struggling to take care of their mental health and keeping up with their education. So many students around the world are barely passing their classes and are barely getting by in their own lives. The school board should not sit by and wait until the situation is so drastic that they are forced to open schools. Schools must open for the good of the future of the students they should be taking care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Greta. Jackie Irby, followed by Virginie Gobier.
I talk too fast.
Hi, my name is Jackie. I am a parent at Rosa Parks. I am also calling to ask you to reopen schools for 5 days per week of in-person instruction for all families who need it as soon as possible. Our children have been waiting for 10 or 11 months for a plan to reopen. We still don't have a date. The October date passed. I think there was a date in December or November that passed. The January date passed. We need to be able to plan. Many children are suffering from negative mental health impacts. They cannot wait any longer. Preschools are open, private schools are open, public schools in Marin are open, public schools all over the country are open. We need you as leaders to set a date, provide that leadership, and so that we can meet a target and reopen our schools as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Greta, if you're still listening, you did not talk too fast. You were wonderful. Virginie Gobier, followed by Yvette Falarka.
Hello, I am a parent of 2 kids at BAM, kinder and second grade. So here we are again under the California threshold for reopening, and yet we are not open and won't be in the near future. And the plan you are currently negotiating so hard is just a joke, a little play date that you can be able to say, yes, we are open. But you keep ignoring our demands for a 5 days a week plan. You keep ignoring all the health and medical authorities that say we need to reopen schools. So I don't understand. Are you really that weak that you can't negotiate a plan with the teacher unions? Last time, Mr. Alper, you were worried about the community being divided. Yes, for sure, the community is profoundly divided. Many parents, including myself, have now a lot of resentment against my children's teachers. And yes, families start to pit against each other. Of course, every time a leadership is so weak, people mistrust and pit against each other. So what are you waiting for? Do you need a court to order you to reopen? Is that what it will take? Do we need to sue our district to get our children back? It's a question.
Thank you. Yvette Falarka, followed by Sagar Pilania.
Yvette Valarca, I'm a teacher at Martin Luther King Middle School, speaking on behalf of the Eon BAM caucus. I strongly believe that we should put our energy into focusing on getting all teachers and school staff, as well as everyone in our community, vaccinated first, so we can start face-to-face with our students with confidence after we're all protected. We've struggled as long as we have through this catastrophe to see it through safely, not loosen up and lose even more in the final lap. Many teachers, those of us who work in the schools, support staff, we're afraid for our safety and our families and loved ones' safety. Already hundreds of educators have died from COVID across the country, and no teacher wants to lose a single student or see our students suffer, having lost a parent, grandparent, or family member.
Thank you, Ms. Valarca. Sigar Pilania, followed by Ben Gerhardstein.
Hi, my daughter Rena will go first.
My name is Rena, and I go to school at Cragmont. I want schools to open. I want schools to open as soon as possible.
Thank you. For the remaining time, I would like to just call out where do we stand. Private schools and preschools have been open for months with minimal cases. Many other countries we love comparing ourselves to, Canada, UK, France, have prioritized opening schools above all else. Number two, the winter surge is over and we are below previously discussed thresholds. And three, we have a vaccine. My request, pick a date. No bridges made, no person was put on the moon without a launch date. But previously, April 21st was said, that sounds like a good date to me. Number two, distance learning is a backup, not the primary plan. I agree, these are play dates, not schooling. And three, vaccinate teachers now, not in a month, not in 2 months, now. It's a few days of supply to give peace of thousands of teachers, students, and families all across Berkeley. We can do this. What do we lose out? We have heard kids are losing out. Number two, there's no equity in private schools charging $25,000 a year being open while public schools are closed. And three, public schools will suffer for decades. Everyone I know is applying to private schools with and without scholarships. This is it, guys. Make a decision. Let's move on. Thank you.
Ben, thank you very much. Ben Gerhardstein, followed by Angela Gallegos Castillo.
Good evening, board members. I'm a Washington elementary parent, and I'm here tonight to urge you and your labor partners to step up and reopen elementary schools. As you know, yesterday, Alameda County crossed the COVID rate threshold for reopening for elementary schools. And so we can expect local health officials will soon green light reopenings for schools that have strong mitigation measures in place. Berkeley Unified has a strong plan to assure student and staff safety in elementary schools. The missing ingredient is an agreement with teachers and staff. And from what I've seen, BUSD's negotiating positions are aligned with public health guidance on reopening schools. The unions are not. I strongly support prioritizing teachers and staff for vaccination, but it's not necessary to safely reopen. It's time now to prioritize the well-being of our children. A year's worth of study has shown that school closures are harming children and that we can safely return to in-person instruction. Let's do it now.
Thank you. Angela Gallegos Castillo, followed by Martin de Mucho Flores.
Good evening, board. Thank you for this time. I'm Berkeley parent and also representing Latinos Unidos at Berkeley. I just want to first say that I feel for all the parents. Everyone is suffering, but I know that you're doing your best to make sure that everyone returns safely, and that it hopefully includes advocacy for a vaccine, the vaccination for all our teachers and staff. Real quickly, thank you. Latinos Unidos is happy that the timeline for the master plan for English learners was shifted. It's now elongated, and we really do want to see a full engagement of parents. Please support the funding for the consultant for the work to happen. And I do agree that the document as it stands now is lacking vision and goals. Please support the ethnic studies and bring back Native American studies at the high school. It is so critical for identity formation of students of color. And look, there's diverse opinions. Latinos Unidos is working on a community survey to understand how the Latino families are seeing the situation more soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Martin de Mucho Flores, followed by Carrie Rybinski.
Hello, this is Martin. I'm gonna pass it to my son to say something real quickly.
Hello, my name is Martin Severo de Mucha Flores, and I am a student at Sylvia Mendez Elementary School. And I say we shouldn't open schools. Teachers and students to get the vaccination before opening schools. Thank you.
So I just wanted to pick up on after some of the things that were said from the Latinos Unidos, and that, we need to really prioritize a consultant to work with the Yale master plan. That communication with the Latinx, Latina, Latino community in Berkeley has been pretty shallow. So really need to think deeply about it. Really take advantage of the ethnic studies through a K-12 strategy can provide opportunities for early college credit, pretty much at the middle school and high school, if we look at partnering with our local community colleges. And then the last thing I just wanted to encourage us to think about is the board to think about or consider is taking on a Latinx resolution that really prioritizes leveraging the resources in the community, and then also funding programs that really center on the Latino, Latina, Latinx experience. And I'm happy for the work I'm really excited about the work y'all doing leading to open schools. And I agree, it should open safely and thoughtfully, but not in a rush.
Thank you. Carrie Rybinski, sorry, followed by Seth Siegel. Oh, we lose Carrie. Oh, there she is.
Oh, hello?
Yep,
okay.
We can hear you.
Hi, I'm a parent of a second grade student at Sylvia Mendez and a 4-year-old that has been in preschool 5 days a week since June and will be going into kindergarten next year. I'm also the proud sister of the assistant superintendent of Piedmont Schools, and I was able to talk to her last night after she finished a very long parent orientation, as they will start opening their K-6 classrooms next week. I urge BUSD to follow in the footsteps of our neighboring districts and provide an in-person learning option starting in February. As our awesome second grade teacher said at our monthly parent meeting last week, the kids have hit a wall with distance learning since winter break. The time is now to provide an in-person option for those who want to come back to school in person. Parents want to know what they can do to help. Please let us know what we can do to support our teachers. Thank you all for your time and energy and leadership.
Thank you. We have a few more speakers. Seth Siegel, followed by Chudi Nidubaku.
Hello, my name is Seth Siegel. First of all, thank you all for allowing me to speak. I have 2 children at Berkeley Arts Magnet. Go Coyotes! Much respect to Ms. Jenkins and Ms. Pithow. Not only am I a parent, but I'm also a full-time social worker. I work with chronically homeless veterans. I worked since the pandemic began in equal parts the Tenderloin as well as downtown Oakland. Given my job, I cannot take my kids to work. I cannot work from home. I work literally in the community every single day. Arguably with the most vulnerable and compromised immune systems that there are. I want to speak to the safety aspect. I understand a lot of teachers and staff members are stressed out, scared, overwhelmed that the possibility of what they're seeing and possibly coming up against related to school starting back up. I want to say that, I was the same way. It took me a lot of time to get to the point where I'm more comfortable. I learned to trust my PPE, trust the science, trust myself, and now I trust the vaccine. And by and large, where I work right now, no one has contracted COVID whatsoever. No one has died from COVID where I work. So I just want to say, I understand it's stressful, but over time, I know that things will get better and normalcy will happen and success is very possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chudi Nidubaku, followed by Hillary Killimanek.
Hi, thank you. This is actually Nicole Black-Ears. I'm Chudi's wife.
So while I understand it's really a huge challenge to reopen and to figure out everything that's needed to safely reopen, I want to say that we've had basically 11 months to figure this plan out. I think that's more than enough time. Schools all over the country and internationally have managed to safely reopen. My 3-year-old goes to preschool and it's part of a larger private school. They've safely reopened. She wears a mask all day. It's not a problem. The data overwhelmingly support that this can be done safely. And the data also show that there's an immense learning loss going on among our students. There's a growing mental health crisis. I really worry that the public schools and the students attending the public schools will never actually recover from this if we don't open immediately. I'm also disappointed in the hybrid model that's been proposed. I think it makes things more complicated than they need to be and doesn't increase safety at all. In fact, it might actually decrease safety because children will go on to other childcare arrangements on the off days from the hybrid plan. So while I appreciate the work that you all are doing, I think that we just need to look at what others have done and repeat it. There's nothing that makes us different. We can do this too. Please open your schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have 2 more speakers, Hillary Kiliminik and Justin Lehrer. If you've raised your hand and didn't get a chance to speak, you can, there'll be another public comment period at the end of the meeting.
Hi, I just want to express my deep appreciation for Director Babbitt for showing such strong leadership and urging the district to move forward immediately, and would really like to hear other directors and the superintendent show the same level of leadership and urgency in this crisis, and to set a date for reopening so that we all have a target to move towards. And second, I'd also like to hear from BUSD what the plan is to make up for all the learning loss that we know is happening and is not even really being measured. It's very disheartening that we don't have a plan to reopen this year, and we have heard nothing about how we're going to make up for all the loss, because this is going to affect us for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last public speaker is Justin Lehrer.
Hello, I'm Justin Lehrer. I'm a parent of a 2nd and a 4th grader at Berkeley Arts Magnet who desperately want to return to school in person. Berkeley is unique and special in so many ways, and my family truly appreciates this. We love and support our teachers and our schools without question, and recognize that our teachers are doing their very best with this difficult situation. But it's time to reopen now. Marin has been open for months and is expanding. Palo Alto, Menlo Park are open. Orinda is targeting February 9th for reopening. City of San Francisco is suing their school district to reopen, a path that I think everyone here would definitely want to avoid. I understand labor negotiations are complex, they're governed by state law, but other districts are overcoming these challenges, and I believe BUSD needs to lead on this issue, not be held hostage to the conditions of one stakeholder group. I simply don't see what makes us so unique that public health guidance and science would not guide our actions. I'm seeing parents and others interested in reopening cite real science, bringing all the real expertise of our community to bear, while the unions seem to lean into fear and pressure to exert their influence. It's time for the unions to step up. It's time for the district leadership to step up. No more excuses. Time to push back, set a date, and reopen quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the open public comment period. And we appreciate all of the comments. And next we will hear from our union representatives. I believe there's a comment from the Berkeley Federation of Teachers, right, Ms. Chires? If there's, and I don't know, do we know if there's any other union comments? If there's if you're a union representative, raise your hand. I don't see any. So let's play the video from Berkeley Federation of Teachers.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent Stevens. I'm Matt Meyer, president of the Berkeley Federation of Teachers. Tonight, I'd like to talk about the glimmer of hope on the horizon as local COVID cases continue to decline and vaccinations continue to be administered. It has been a long and challenging winter. We are not yet in the clear, but there are reasons to be optimistic. BFT members appreciate the community activism that has generated local and statewide conversations about prioritizing vaccines for people who will work in person with students in our schools, teachers and classified staff alike. Although we do not yet know when vaccines will be available, we believe that the delivery of vaccines to education workers will have a positive impact on our timeline for returning to in-person teaching and learning. We know that there are many worthy groups that need and deserve prompt access to the vaccine. We gratefully acknowledge the healthcare providers, transit workers, retail clerks, and many others who have served our communities throughout the past months, even in the face of a horrific surge of infections. We know that senior citizens are especially vulnerable and eager for the vaccine, and that people of all ages with underlying health conditions are anxiously awaiting their turn. We know that communities of color have suffered disproportionately and have a special moral claim to the vaccine's protection. Teachers are not asking to jump the line. We are not insisting that our work is more valuable than any other. We are sad and frustrated that the vaccine rollout is so slow and confusing for everyone, and that wrenching public health decisions must be made in the order of eligibility. However, we do know that our community is beyond anxious about the timeline for returning to some form of in-person learning. Many Berkeley students and their families are stressed and suffering. Their teachers are as well. We all know that there is no substitute for being in a safe and healthy classroom. We hope that soon we can move into the future with a plan to vaccinate educators. Once educators have received the vaccine, the USD's in-person staffing capabilities and student support services can improve. Some employees who would qualify for accommodations prior to receiving the vaccine can be available to work in person. Additionally, the vaccine enables educators to serve multiple cohorts of students. This will enable our special education program and intervention program to be more fully utilized in person. Additionally, BFT and BUSD are working together to serve our most vulnerable students in person. We have been discussing various options for our support staff and teachers to work with small groups of students in person while negotiations on a larger reopening continue. I'd like to end tonight with a plea to our community to be compassionate towards each other, even toward those who disagree with our strongly held positions. The enemy is the pandemic, not each other.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. I don't see any other union comments, union representatives. So now we'll have comments from our committees. I know we have a comment from the BSEP Planning and Oversight Committee. I'm not sure, is it Ms. Pastica or Ms. Beery? Do we know who it is?
I believe it is Ms. Pastica, yes.
Okay, Terry Pastica, will you raise your hand, Terry? Oh, she is raising it. There you are. Go ahead.
Can you all
Yep.
hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Okay,
you.
great. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Terry Pastica, and I'm here from Planning and Oversight, an advisory body that makes recommendations to the school board on two special tax measures Berkeley voters have passed. The first is BSEP, which has been approved since 1986 to supplement the baseline property tax funds that support the district, which were significantly impacted by Prop 13. BSEP's primary focus is funding class size reduction, and the most recent measure passed in 2016. So we are in year 4 of an 8-year measure that generates an additional $32 million a year to the district, or about 20% of the budget. The second is BERA, which voters approved in 2020 to support educator salaries and to promote recruitment, retention in hard to staff areas. And we're in year 1 of this 12-year measure. Every school in the district is represented on the P&O, and I'm an alternate from Berkeley High. And this is an overview of our January 26th meeting. The P&O covered a lot of ground to finish reviewing our 2019-2020 annual reports from all program areas. We continued looking at the high quality instruction budget, which by far is the largest chunk of BSEP at 66%. Within the high quality instruction budget, we looked at the following subcomponents. We looked at class size reduction, which funds additional teachers to lower class sizes in Berkeley to target goals. Based on the calculations, BSEP funds about 3 out of 10 or 30% of educators. And in 2019, this was about 15 million of the 32 million in BSEP dollars, which included a supplemental 1 million to the general fund because of budget concerns last year. We looked at the professional development budget, which BSEP funds 1.3 million of. We reviewed the various programs educators had access to and heard about concerns for the upcoming year. The P&O members asked for more information about the impact of the significant spending on professional development in terms of data-driven outcomes, if a side group is needed, to look at data collection to assess how professional development is used, the quantifiable impacts on students, and what's happening through an equity lens. We looked at a program evaluation budget, which is about $350,000, and how the district collects data. We reviewed the issues being tracked and had a really robust discussion on issues like, with so many students struggling with distance learning, is there tracking of students who are falling into needing RTI, lit, and math coaching? In the previous year, the district provided schools with multi-year testing data, but with the change last year to STARS testing, lost that ability. And so when will the district return to being able to provide schools test results over a multi-year time period? And the high school used to have staff resources dedicated to responding to data requests, and that is no longer supported. So is there an opportunity to address that? We looked at the technology annual report and all the work done during distance learning. P&O members were interested in hearing if the district has a systemic manner in which it determines what tech resources students need versus the opt-in system that it appears to have now, where parents have to seek out resources. We asked about, is there any kind of assessment looking at the connection between poor attendance and distance learning and those students who need tech support? And additional questions about parental controls on district issued Chromebooks, and more information about who is the Berkeley Public Schools Fund, which has contributed so much in terms of resources and support to the USD. We next reviewed the school site fund annual report and how individual schools chose to spend their nearly $3 million in collectively in site funds. It turned out to be about $285 per student, I think, that was directed to each school. And the last area we looked at was the proposed cost of living adjustment, or COLA, for both BSEP and BERA, which looks at essentially what is the proposed tax increase for next year. And what we heard was, based on the Bay Area Consumer Price Index, it will be 2% for both. So the questions in this area were, how does COLA get integrated into the educator pay scale? And are there any years where there are unforeseen expenditures where BSEP has to spend more than anticipated? And that was it. That's all we did. So we thank you for the opportunity to give you this update. The next meeting of the P&O is February 23rd at 6:30 online, open to the members of the public. We invite any board member as well as any member of the public to attend. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pastigan, and thank you to you and your colleagues on that really critical committee for all that work. We're really grateful. I don't see any other committee representatives, so I'm going to give it a second. Okay, not seeing any more committee representatives. I want to mention again that our superintendent had a family emergency and could not be with us, unfortunately, tonight. There will be a session that he's going to lead devoted to the issue of school reopening next week, probably on Thursday, but the exact date and time will be, of course, blasted out to the community as soon as we can confirm it and have all the information. But we apologize that he's not with us here tonight. So now's an opportunity for board member comment before we move into our agenda, the rest of our agenda. So is there a board member who'd like to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay, go ahead, Director Miller.
I would just like, I'm bringing up a little part of our conversation from last week when we looked at the slideshow with the data and had the teacher panel on. And as much as I appreciate that, I'm going to say both things about that. I'm a student before I'm the student director. I go to distance learning every day, and I was a little disappointed with our conversation, honestly. It was not as constructive as it should have been. Just seeing the data, it was extremely alarming, and I think any conversations about distance learning, we need to make sure we're more constructive in making plans going forward with that. I am experiencing, and my classmates are experiencing, those gaps in learning every day. And from the past 12 years I've been in this district, I can say this year is completely different. And also I want to say that I'm all for listening to the science on this. Science is saying it's safe to go back. We should be giving the option for parents who really need to go back as soon as possible, especially our most vulnerable students who cannot cooperate in this kind of learning anymore. someone said it perfectly. This is a backup plan, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to be mindful of that. We should be looking for what our real plan is.
Thank you, Director Miller. Who'd like to go next? Who wants to go next? Director Babbitt?
Just give me one more second.
Okay, sure, of course. Director Vasudev?
Thanks, Director Alper, or President Alper. Thank you to all the caretakers and students who came out to share public comment today. Hearing from you directly is one of the things that I actually look forward to the most during our board meetings. I want to keep my comments brief today, but I want to say to all the parents who have been advocating for schools to reopen because you're concerned for your children, that I really hear you and that I really understand what you're going through. As the mom of a kindergartner with a disability, I know what that daily struggle is like. And it really pains me to hear from parents when they say things like, I want to leave the district. Like, you know, I've heard that a couple times tonight. I just want you to know that really pains me as a director. I also know that our teachers are also acutely aware that distance learning is not ideal. I've been disheartened by the recent anti-educator sentiments in our community. As many of you know, our educators are parents in our district too, right? And so, you know, that's a nuance that sometimes we forget about, but it's really important. And I want to make sure that during these trying times that we're keeping 2 E's kind of at the forefront of our discourse, which I think sometimes aren't there. These are empathy and equity. I also want to reassure the public, as you know, as has been brought up also by Director Miller right now, that issues such as learning loss are really important to many of our board members. And I know, you know, our superintendent is not here, but I know that district staff is working really hard to address this, and there will be more information forthcoming about this. So Director Miller, I hear you loud and clear. And, you know, I heard that in the public comments today as well. I also want us to know that during this trying time, we're stronger when we work together. And so it was really great to hear that groups and advocacy groups in the community like Latinos Unidos at Berkeley are working hard to advocate for vaccines for essential workers. I think that's really important. And that, you know, for parents that want to plug in, I think that's another important resource to try to work with community groups that are advocating for that, because that's definitely a need. For the families that gave public comment today in support of important equity work in our district, such as the ELL master plan, support for Latinx students, support for the implementation of the Black Lives Matter resolution, support for our comprehensive ethnic studies program. Thank you for coming tonight. I know that our work, our equity work in particular, is incredibly important and needs to continue, whether we're in distance learning or in person. We need to continue to fund that really important work. And so I really thank you for your comments. And we're still dealing with 2 pandemics, the way that I see them, the pandemic of white supremacy and the pandemic of COVID-19. So making sure that our students can recover from both of these pandemics is incredibly important. So that's it, thanks. I said that I was gonna be brief, but ended up not being brief. So sorry about that, President Alper.
That's okay. Vice President Brown.
Thanks, that's okay. Director Vasudev, I'll be brief for you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to all of you who came out to speak tonight. Thank you to those who spoke in response, or in support rather, of expanding OFI, which, as we mentioned last board meeting, is so necessary, especially during this time. So thank you to those of you who spoke on behalf of that. Thank you to those of you who also spoke on behalf of reopening schools. And for those of you who emailed us, put fire under us, and are literally begging for our leadership right now to open schools. Please know that your words have not fallen on deaf ears. I say this over and over again, and that we are doing our work as elected officials to make sure that the conversations that need to be had and the work that needs to be done is taking place. On a lighter note, this month, today's February 3rd, which this week kicks off Black History Month. And Black history is not just history for Black or African American people. Black history is embedded in the fibers of our history as Americans and our history as humans across the world. One of my absolute favorite quotes from my favorite figure in Black history, Nelson Mandela, says that education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. And in fact, that it has to be truer now more than ever. Education is the most powerful weapon that we can use to change the world. And so as an elected official, school board director, I continue to look forward to using the advocacy to work with our union partners to make sure that education is the most powerful weapon that we use to change not just the world, but Berkeley.
Thank you, Vice President Brown. You ready, Director Babbitt?
You can go, Julie. She raised her hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see. Director Sinai.
That's okay, Director Babbitt. You can go if you'd like. I'll be quick. We'll all be quick. I want to share my appreciation with everybody who came out tonight and spoke on reopening schools, the EL master plan, OFI. And I also want to thank everybody, I think over 1,000 people who participated in the session last week about reopening schools. And, you know, I echo Director Vasudev and Vice President Brown's comments. Not only do the comments not fall on deaf ears, I think we are, as a board, are doing everything we can to try to encourage our administration and our labor partners to come to agreements to get schools open as soon as they can in a safe manner. This community embraces education. This community, we love our teachers and staff. We love our students, and there is no difference among our community about the passion and the care for the students in this district. And I think we need to understand where our teachers and staff are coming from, and we need to understand the diversity of our parent interests, some of which get expressed at school board meetings and some of which don't get expressed at school board meetings. And I think I really appreciate Latinos Unidos saying that they'll survey their community, because I think when we've done these surveys of our families, we have not heard from our African American and Latino families. And I'm really clamoring to hear from the community that has been the hardest hit by COVID. And while, you know, the panel that was a few weeks ago talked about the Latinx community having no predisposition genetically to contracting COVID over anybody else, the social conditions that a lot of our Latinx families are living in are highly vulnerable to their families and their communities. And that has been shown by escalating COVID rates, even as other rates are going down. So I look forward to hearing from Latinos Unidos about the information that they're gathering. And I too really support setting a date and working toward that target. And we've tried it a couple of times and we haven't quite made it. And I said, you know, numerous times in January that my primary objective was that we get our negotiations moving so that when the date, when it's ready to go, we're ready to go. We haven't hit that yet. We're not ready yet, and we still have work to do. So I want to thank the families for keeping our feet to the fire. And I just want to continue to make sure people know we are at the table and we are negotiating. And I have cautious optimism around the vaccine, not because I'm very optimistic that the vaccine is here. It's going to take a long time for it to roll out through the communities that are most in need. And so I think we need to look at the science. We need to look at when it's safe. What do we need to do in social distancing, mask wearing, hand washing, and what can we do while more people are slowly getting vaccinated? So there's a lot to discuss. I wanted one more comment, which is not related to COVID. But as we embrace our teachers and staff, we have been working for the last couple of years on workforce housing, because in order to recruit and retain our teachers and staff, the cost of living here is prohibitive. And so we will be talking on the February 17th school board meeting about where we are with the planning around workforce housing. And there'll be a presentation by the consultants who did the feasibility study and staff with making recommendations. So I look forward to that conversation coming forward. So I wasn't brief either. I apologize.
Dr. Babbitt.
Oh, I won't even pretend that I'm going to be brief. because I have 3 comments that I would like to make tonight. And the third will be regarding school reopening. So first, I want to encourage everyone to check out the Berkeley High School PTSA website. It's a phenomenal website. There is a math survival kit on there, which is a result of a 2-year effort providing cold videos that complement over the 2000 Ready, Set, Go problem sets in Berkeley High School's Math 1, 2, 3 curriculum. We often hear our math advocates from Berkeley High School talking about the need to identify to address the math crisis. Well, here you go. They're also doing something about it. So please check out that website. They have emotional and mental health services and resources, links there, as well as shared family experiences and a survey of the impact of distance learning as expressed by our Berkeley High School parents and guardians. And they also have a video of why Black History Month is important from me, your school board director. And that leads me to my next comment, which is about the Black History Oratorical Fest, Speak and Inspire. So every year we talk about Speak and Inspire because we really want to teach Black History Month from the perspective of having that strength to overcome, and how can we use this part of our history to really inspire us all. So the theme this year goes, Speak and Inspire, Black Women Triumph from the continent of Africa, the Civil Rights Movement, Black Lives Matter movement, and the Vice Presidency. So check in with your local schools to find out how to participate at the local level. And the district-wide competition will be held in April, which we've done intentionally to make sure that we can give all schools and families time to adequately participate. Finally, school reopening. So I want to thank Dr. Stevens for leading the conversation with our community last week on this issue. And since then, I've been hearing people from all points of view on this issue really bring home that we have a fundamental trust issue. And overcoming that trust issue is important. It's important when the president and the governor, our funders, are saying we must open schools. It will be safe to open schools now. As entities of public education, it is in our interest to become more solutions-oriented. So I started thinking about this trust issue and the realities of it and the solution. And so here's an example. Let's take soap. So people have said, well, I don't want to go back because for years, the district hasn't even made sure we had enough soap. Now let's replace that word, the district, with the process needed to make sure there is soap. And how do I support my colleagues? We can easily work together to make sure there is soap. We can release a kid early to go and check. No soap, send a text, instant message, deliver some from the parent or the school provided stash, and boom. It's not about trusting the district. It's about how we work together to ensure this layer of protection has been met. There are very real, practical ways to solve these COVID-related I don't trust problems. So let's name them and address them. And what is the system in place and how do I support it? How do you in your role support it? Because this long distance or distance learning relationship is going to end. And what information do you need to know so you can feel confident as others do that we can go to school, be our brother's keeper, and fight COVID-19, our true and common enemy? We can do this. We must do this. And because quite literally, the educational and mental health data is telling us our kids can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Babbitt. I'm going to, give me 1 second here. I'll just make a couple, I'm also claim to be brief comments. I appreciate all of the people who came out tonight. As Director Sane said, the many hundreds of people who came out the other night to to talk about reopening, and also not to get lost in the shuffle, but the comments tonight that didn't have to do with reopening, about OFI, about our English learner master plan, and other issues that are important to people in the community. You know, we want our educators to feel safe returning to school. And just to be clear, we need our educators to feel safe returning to school, just because bluntly, we can't reopen without an agreement with our unions, an agreement that's ratified, voted for by a majority of the union members. So it's heartbreaking to hear caregivers and parents and students, and I really appreciate the students who spoke tonight. I hear the frustration and the pain. I know it, I feel it. And to members of the community who say, you know, open schools now, or even to set a specific date, I would say this, you know, this board has unanimously expressed its opinion on several occasions in public that we can open schools safely in a hybrid model, which is unavoidable given requirements for social distancing, with masks, with social distancing, with staff testing, with safety measures in place. We can do it. We believe we can do it safely when public health officials allow us to. That's the district's position. And we've been pretty clear about that. We cannot unilaterally impose that view on our unions. We just can't. And unless the state steps in and takes collective bargaining away from local districts, that's a part of the process that we must engage with. And it's a reality that, you know, for what it's worth, no private school has to even think about. Our teachers union's position has been, and they've also been very clear and public about it, that we should not attempt to reopen in the hybrid model we've been discussing until we're in a lower tier of community spread than the one that public health officials would otherwise allow us to open in. So we're working with them. They're our partners, they're our teachers. We're working with them to reach an agreement that will actually result in kids getting back into school this semester. It's possible that such an agreement would be impacted by the availability of the vaccine. And I know some will say, and I think this director of the CDC said this today, that vaccines should not be a prerequisite to opening. I think it's also true, it's sort of undeniable that vaccinations represent a great hope and allow us to envision a partial reopening, a hybrid reopening this spring, and hopefully, and this is what I want to see, a full reopening K-12, TK to 12 in the fall. This is probably clear to most people, but just in case it's not, the district is not in charge of vaccines. We've advocated for our educators to be given priority in the distribution of what is a life-saving vaccine, even over more vulnerable members of our community. And I don't think that's an easy call. But the state has put them in what's called the 1B priority grouping. It's all haphazard and frustrating and unreliable, which is to our great dismay and frustration. But I'm hoping that it means we can get shots in the arms of our educators soon, and that should allow us to reopen our schools. And finally, I'll just say this. I talk to teachers all the time. And although they're trying to make the most of distance learning, I haven't spoken to a single teacher who would not rather be teaching in the classroom. Every one of them would rather be in the classroom. They want to ensure that they're safe and that the kids are safe when they go back to the classroom. Obviously, we want that too. Obviously, that's our highest priority. And we know that kids are suffering in distance learning. We know it, and we all want to get back to school, and that's what we're working towards. So please keep emailing us, calling us, and coming to public comment. We need to hear from you. But that's the position that the board has taken publicly. And again, I apologize on Dr. Stevens' behalf that he's not here tonight, but he will have another dedicated forum on this issue next week. So stay tuned for information about that. I'm now going to move us to the consent calendar and ask if there's a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Motion by Vice President Brown. Is there a second? Second by Director Babbitt. Second by Director Babbitt. Thank you. Ms. Chiras?
Yes. Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Vasudev?
Yes.
Director Babbitt?
Yes.
Director Sinai?
Yes.
Vice President Brown?
Yes.
President Alper.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So, and again, I'm just going to ask everybody's patience since our superintendent's not with us tonight. We're going to move to the first discussion item, which is a budget update in it. And it was going to be a discussion of priorities, but because Dr. Stevens is not here, we're going to postpone the discussion of priorities and instead just hear from Assistant Superintendent Follansby, right? Assistant Superintendent Follansby, you're going to present on this, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so Assistant Superintendent Follansby will present on the budget update, and we will hold off on the discussion of priorities until a future meeting when Dr. Stevens is here with us. So Assistant Superintendent Follansby, I'll turn it over to you for this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen, and I see I've gotten permission, and I'm just going to do that right now. That's not it. Sorry. I'm having problems sharing my screen. 1 minute.
Okay.
Okay, can we see that now?
No.
I'm going to try again. 1 moment.
Okay.
I'm on a tiny little laptop and I can't see the screen. Sorry. This may be it. Yeah.
Yeah, that looks like it.
Can we see it now?
Yep.
Okay, good. Gonna start. So good evening, board members and directors and other people who are actually attending. It's actually nice to present this early in the meeting. Usually I'm the last person, so I'm hoping we have several people actually watching and looking at this presentation tonight. So the outcome of this meeting, as President Alper indicated, I'm going to be looking at base funding, supplemental funding scenarios. We can look at initial recommendations. However, we're not going to look at COVID funding, and we're not going to look at discussion of 21-22 priorities. And let me make sure we have the right right screen. So we do. So the first thing we're going to do is look at our unduplicated pupil count, and this impacts our funding for our LCAP, our more vulnerable students. And at the last presentation, I presented the impact of the governor's workshop and indicated I'll be bringing back additional information with the unduplicated pupil count and how that actually impacts our projections. So this screen has a lot of information included. We have links to the 2021 student, the 2021 unduplicated pupil count. There's a definition of the unduplicated pupil count that provides a lot of information as to what information is gathered and how it's gathered. And this screen is actually pretty informative. This is actually from the CalPADS report. It's just a summary of the different categories that they look at. It's important to know that the unduplicated count means that each pupil is actually counted only once, even if the pupil meets more than one of the various criteria that's collected for this unduplicated pupil count. So this is actually straight from CalPADS, as I mentioned before. And they report the total enrollment. They also look at the free and reduced eligibility counts based on these various criteria. They come up with an unduplicated eligible free and reduced meal count. They look at EL funding, and then they look at total unduplicated student count. So you can see this is not a straight addition. These are the various categories, and CalPATS actually goes through, looks at each student and determines which of these students are appearing only once in these categories. So you could see the unduplicated student count actually for 2021, 2743, 1920 was 3020, and in 1819 it was 3275. So we took this opportunity to actually look at the trend for unduplicated pupil count. And on the next slide, you could see that we've had a steady decline since 2013-14. We've had a change. Oops. So these are just a change year over year. We've gone from 137 and for a decline in students and percentage counts, which has been an ongoing trend. And you can see for 21-22, we're actually having the projected loss, and it's hard to see my screen again because it's so small. The decline that we're having, actually, the loss of our students is a 7% reduction. And that's the projection that we're going to be moving forward with, just in terms of landing on a number for unduplicated pupil count going forward. And what does this, what is the impact of the reduced UPP on projections? We actually implemented these numbers in 2021. So we did not update these numbers at first interim because they weren't finalized. Now we have finalized numbers. You could see our supplemental funding actually went down from 5.1 million to 5 million. It's a loss of $153,000. And on the governor's workshop, the information that I presented when at the last meeting, we actually have a decrease of $312,000. So our funding, instead of it being 5.2 million for our supplemental funding, it's down to 4.9 million. The decrease over 2 years, it's important to note that there is a decrease over 2 years of almost $500,000. So this is a tabular form of what it looks like. Just looking at the UPP, not the, this is just with the governor's budget information. I'm looking at 2021 because that's our current year, and 21-22 is our projected year based on the governor's revised. So the governor's proposed budget. So you could see where this is the $153,000 we're projecting that we'll be losing in 2021. And actually in 21-22, the additional $312,000. You notice that the UPP does not impact our base funding. Again, this funding is predominantly important for our more vulnerable students. The other thing that impacts our projections, and again, I'm focusing on the unrestricted general fund, our average daily attendance. And this has to do with the funding that we get per grade span. And this year we have, we're looking at various scenarios and trying to land on a scenario that we think is more probable or more conservative actually at this point. So the governor's budget, I don't know if you remember from our last presentation, he talked about a possible cliff in 22-23, and this is just the way that our ADA is actually calculated. The state was not collecting attendance for, let me move this screen over, for 2021. So we could use our prior year ADA for, or 2019 could be used for 2021 as well as for 21-22. So the cliff that we're looking at is 22-23. So whereas that does not impact our projections for the budget year that we're focusing on, it comes into play when we look at our multi-year projections for the out year. So whenever we look at our budgets for a particular fiscal year, we not only look at the current budget, but we look at 2 subsequent years. So, so we're looking at the cliff in the second year in our multi-year projections of the new budget year. This is a graphical representation of how this works. So in 1920, we could use our projections in 1920 for 2021, regardless of what our actual ADA was, our projected ADA is in 2021. For 21-22, we also benefit from the lower of the higher of the current or prior year. And this is the cliff that we're talking about in 22-23. So what does this mean? Our attendance, 94.26 for 2019-20, we can use that number all the way through to 21-22, or the budget year for the new year. However, we do have the cliff. We're thinking a 7% decline is assuming we have no recovery from this year's 7-year decline. So we're projecting a 7-year decline. It's not going to affect our funding until 22-23. So we're taking that into account when we're looking at projections for the out year. A 3% decline would, instead of it being 94.26, it would be 91.43. The 7% decline you can see is 87.66, which is the number that we're using going forward. Another aspect of us looking at our projections is our COLA. And I appreciate that this year it's a lot more complicated because we have several moving parts and none of them are landing us on an assumption that we can just use you know, whatever we've been given from the state, because it's been inconsistent. So this is this slide should look familiar. I presented it at our last at my last presentation. So what we want to look at is in years 22, 23, and in 23, 24, you can see that the Department of Finance, their estimated COLA is 2.98, and school services is 1.23. In 23, 24 is 3.05, and school services 1.61. So what does this mean for us? If we looked at the Department of Finance at the funding, you can see our base funding projections, our supplemental funding projections, and our funding, our total funding, 95.8 million, 92.1, and 92 million. However, oh wait, that's a previous slide. So 95.8, 92.1, and 94.7. That's not an advisable COLA that we would use based on the fact that our school services COLA was so much lower. These are the numbers when we look at our school services projections. Not spending a lot of time here because I'm proposing that we use a blended model or a blended COLA, which would give us a COLA of 2.11% for 22-23 and 23-24, 2.33. Lots of numbers, lots of moving parts, but it's essential that we continue to look at the various options that we have and come up and land on a model that we think is the most likely and actually also possibly the most conservative. We've landed on, again, 21, 22, 3.84. There was no discussion there. Budget year, we're fine with 3.84. These other COLAs just impact the multi-year projections for the out year. So this kind of tells you where we kind of landed in terms of our revenue assumptions and projections. So this is our look at our unduplicated pupil count, 2551, we're using the number from 2021, or more recent numbers. We haven't changed. We're hoping we can recover that, but we're keeping the 2551. Or enrollment, 9155. We're projecting the same enrollment. That doesn't impact our funding per se. Our UPP affects our funding for supplemental, and you can see the assumptions for the current and the out year. Our ADA we discussed earlier, and our COLA we discussed earlier. And the question that you should be asking, well, what does this mean for our funding? How does this actually impact the district's funding? So on this next slide, you can see that in terms of our base funding, and we're reading from top to bottom, base funding and then total funding. In 21-22, this is our base year. We agreed on the assumptions, 90.9 million for base funding, 4.9 for supplemental, total 95.8. Now, when we look at 22-23, we can see the impact of the cliff. We're funding on ADA. We're losing $4 million in funding in 22-23. For base, we're losing almost 400 in supplemental. A total change, negative change of 4.4 million, and that's basically the impact of the cliff. In the out year, we are getting a COLA, and we're actually projecting an increase in 23-24, 1.9 in base funding, and another 0.1 in supplemental, for a total of 1.9. So this is the essence of all our number crunching and looking at the various aspects. This is the assumption we propose using moving forward as we move forward with the budget development process. What does this mean in terms of the various or key information for the board in terms of moving forward and budget targets? So we talked about receiving an additional $3.3 million from base funding. LCAP actually saw a reduction in funding of 100,000. BCEP has a positive funding of $230,000. Our cost increases and our budget reductions in our multi-year projections for 21-22, we were projecting budget cuts of $2.8 million. So you can see that leaves us an available new funding ongoing of only $500,000. In BCEP's case, they're projecting available new funding of $120,000. It's important to note that there is available one-time funding through COVID and our new extended time grants. We're looking at $9 million in one-time funding that will be taken into consideration as we build out this budget. And Measure A is looking at $0.2 million in available revenue when they're building out their budget. So the next section is our high-level priorities, and I believe we're going to defer this part of the discussion until Dr. Stevens is back. Is that right, Ty?
Yeah, that's right.
President Alpern. Okay, so at that point, this is a very in-depth discussion of our assumptions that we're looking at just from a revenue point of view from the unrestricted general fund based on supplemental funding, and our thoughts in terms of our beginning the discussion actually of the budget development process. So I can take questions at this time.
Great. Thank you so much, Assistant Superintendent Follansby. Maybe, do you want to unshare your screen?
Sure.
And that was a lot of information. Vice President Brown has also had an emergency come up, and so she is hoping to be back. but had to step away, unfortunately. And so with both Dr. Stevens and Vice President Brown absent right now, we want to defer the discussion of the priorities, but open it up for questions for Assistant Superintendent Fonsby about any aspect of that presentation. So, colleagues, do you have questions? Director Sinai.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Fonsby. I have a couple of questions that are really clarifications.
Sure.
With the unduplicated count,
Yeah.
that decline, we had already been projecting a decline, right?
We were, but we hadn't taken it into account at first interim because they extended the period for us to kind of look at our free and reduced. So we recently got that number and it's been vetted and it's reported to CalPAD. So that's the number that I'm moving forward with.
Because I remember when we were talking about with the PAC, I think toward the end of last year, we had the projections of the reduction in resources due to the changing demographics of our student population.
Correct.
So I was so one question was, in the chart that you had going across the 3 fiscal years, you have the unduplicated count the same. And with the demographics of Berkeley, now, who knows, COVID might have like thrown the demographics into a tailspin and we have more low-income people based on job loss, et cetera. But you're budgeting the same number of students for unduplicated across all 3 years. So I had a question about that. And then should I just ask my second question? Because I think it's a similar chart. Is you mentioned in one of your slides that you were going to project based on the 7% reduction in ADA numbers.
Right.
But then on slide 18, you use, and I didn't catch the number quick enough before the slide went, but you used the number of 9177, which I don't think was the 7% decrease. So I'm just trying to get a sense of the numbers, trying to understand the numbers, and also whether it is really hyper conservative to think that we're not going to get any students back from the 7% loss that we're experiencing right now. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Sure, I can answer both questions, Director Sinai. So with the unduplicated pupil percentage, we think this number that we're reporting is somewhat lower than it really would be because of the pandemic. And I think I reported at the last meeting that our families weren't necessarily filling out forms because they were getting their meals without providing forms. Nutrition services actually went to a great extent to try and get as much information as possible, including sending the information with our seamless summer meals to families. But if families don't feel that they have to fill out or provide that information, they didn't. But remember, also on that UPP slide, there's direct certification. So if any of our families were going through in economic hardship and went to any other state agencies for relief, we actually captured those families. So we're capturing above and beyond by looking at our meal counts. And we think that after the pandemic, that number should go up. So, so we are keeping the number that we projected for UPP from 2021 through all 3 years, just to be conservative. But we think that number, on one hand, we think it's going to increase, but the free and reduced rates it's a national average, and Berkeley, obviously the poverty level that they're looking at, it might not actually work in Berkeley. So we have 2 competing.
Yeah, I guess I was surprised that you didn't have it going down.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
Just given the demographic change in Berkeley, that's what I was surprised by.
No, I think we will capture more as we go back to regular meals. So I think with both competing data points, I'm keeping it now until I get additional information.
Okay.
And then what was the second question?
The other question was, you had one slide where you said you were going to budget based on a 7% decline, which I think was like 8,000 something students.
Right.
But on the other slide, you had 9,000 something students. So
Well, one is enrollment. That was enrollment, but I was projecting ADA. So the enrollment actually, it's not actually impacting anything in our calculator per se. But I should reduce that enrollment as well. I'll adjust that. Yeah, thanks. But the number that we're using in the actual to calculate revenue is the 8,766.
All right, thank you. Other questions?
Just have one quick clarifying question. Yep. So it sounds, Assistant Superintendent Follansby, thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
You're recommending the blended COLA. Is that pretty normal for districts to do when there's such a variation, just to use a blended?
We don't usually have the variation, so that's why this year is somewhat different. Usually, when we go to these conferences, we get a COLA that the Department of Finance or economic advisors, everybody agrees with the COLA, but because this year it's different, we think it's better. It's more than likely we're going to land somewhere in between that range. So we use an average just to be prudent, fiscally prudent. So,
thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. So thank you, Assistant Superintendent Follansby.
Sure.
That was a lot of information. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Next, we're going to move to item 12.2, which is a report from BSEP and Measure E1. And I think is that you, Director Beery?
Yes, it is. And I believe I have share screen. Yes, I do. If you don't mind, shall I begin, President Alper?
Yes, please. That'd be great.
All right, great. Thank you. All right. Well, good evening, board and staff and community. This evening, I'm coming to you with a lot of information as well, but I'm going to try and keep it succinct. This is a presentation for two of our parcel taxes, the Berkeley Schools Excellence Program, BSEP, and the Berkeley Educators Recruitment and Retention Act, BERA. And its annual report, first interim, and looking at our projections as well. So this is the time of year where we're basically looking in three directions at once. We're looking at the past, that's our annual report. And actually there was a bit of a summary that you heard already from the Planning and Oversight Committee in comments. So I won't be dwelling on that, but you do have in your packet quite a bit of information. And then I'll be, for the purposes of the board, really focusing on where we are at first interim with the fund balances, as well as where we're headed for next year, so that you can take that into consideration for your planning. As you know, BSEP is a considerable portion of our overall budget, $33 million, about 19% of the budget. And then our new measure, BERA, provides another 6%, about $10 million all told. So those two together are what are overseen by the Planning and Oversight Committee and of course staff bringing recommendations. And I'm just going to, Dr. Stevens suggested that I include a very brief overview of what those measures are, but just one slide each. So because this is the new one, maybe less familiar, the BERA, the Berkeley Educators Recruitment and Retention Act, just passed in March of 2020. And and currently bringing in about 9.5 million per year. Most of it allocated towards increasing educators' salaries as part of the core strategy for recruitment and retention. However, there is also 5% set aside to programs that are directed at recruiting for hard-to-fill positions. And I believe the board will be hearing a specific presentation from Assistant Superintendent Tobias Espinosa later in the spring, talking about what's being done with those funds. And so I'm just going to give you a snapshot of where BERA is right now. There's no annual report for BERA because it's the first year. So what we just have here is where we are in terms of the revenues that were received this year and allocated in accordance with the terms of the measure. And what this shows you over here on the left is that a portion was set aside to create the 3% required set aside. And then there is a 1% amount, about $90,000 that goes towards staffing for oversight. There's a TSA that also works from this small budget. And then 5% here is the recruitment and retention amount. So that accounted for about $438,000. And the rest towards compensation. So the Planning and Oversight Committee has seen and reviewed those numbers that are in accordance with the measure. The big parcel tax and the one with the longest history since 1986 is, of course, BSEP, now bringing $33 million of much needed funds to our district. And they are allocated fairly specifically when you compare our measure with other districts. We really have very careful allocations to specific purposes, the largest of which is class size reduction. We now call that high quality instruction because it includes class size and reduction as the core purpose, but once that purpose is met and our class size targets are met, which they were both last year and this year, then we have funds that are, if there are funds remaining from that 66%, they're allocated to purposes that we put together in a family called support for teaching and learning. And then the next largest bucket or purpose we've grouped together called Essentials for Excellence, 10% going to our school site programs on a per pupil basis. You heard that last year was $285 per pupil. This year it's $305, making a lot of difference in for each school's capacity of being able to focus on their specific needs at each site. Our school libraries all paid for by BSEP, music and VAPA 4th to 8th grade, not our entire music VAPA program, but 4th to 8th grade paid for by BSEP. A good amount of our instructional technology funds, not all technology, but most of our staffing through BSEP. And then we have another purpose, which we decided to call effective student support. Student achievement strategies, lit coaches, for example, are paid for out of this resource, and then middle school counseling currently, but other counseling is also potentially paid for out of this fund. And last but not least, or actually first, there is a 2% from the net receipts that goes to measure oversight, so that's staffing for the BSEP and BERA office, as well as communication and translation. So that's what BSEP does. So it's quite a bit. And then let me get to the next slide. And this is what's going to stand for the annual report. If we had more time and we weren't trying to do so many things at once, I would love to spend a lot of time really looking at all that the BSEP funds have brought us over the past year. And again, thanking the community for the support that is derived from these taxpayer funds. You actually heard from the superintendent in his State of the District a good amount of detail on some of these funds, including library, music, VAPA. Those are, I think, some of the key resources during distance learning that have really made a difference in our kids' lives, being able to get those instruments to them and create virtual concerts for library. We handed out 46,000 books, I believe, and the library staff have been core to ensuring that distance learning is supported in creative ways. They really hit the ground running this fall supporting teachers in making the adjustment to distance learning. Backing up, I should also, of course, as I mentioned, class size goals are met through BSEP. BSEP provides about a third of our classroom teaching force, so 135 FTE, full-time equivalents, paid for by BSEP. Professional development, not all of our professional development, but quite a bit of it supported by BSEP, including our equity teacher leaders, programs for culturally responsive teaching, constructing meaning for our English language learners, where it was a core activity last year and this year. BREA, which is the Berkeley Research and Evaluation, Berkeley Research Evaluation and Assessment, a program evaluation, which also had to adapt to distance learning, come up with a new attendance system, come up with ways to support us through data in informing decisions that are being made by educators. And then skipping down to technology, of course, you've all heard about the importance of getting out those Chromebooks to kids through partnerships also with the Schools Fund. The site programs have been really important funds, particularly as some of our sites are losing their Title I funds during this shift in demographics that Assistant Superintendent Follansby has alluded to. We also had to work with our principals to basically revamp all their plans. A lot of the plans were made during the earliest part of the pandemic or even pre-pandemic, and a lot of things that had been planned for couldn't happen, like field trips had to be adapted. And then we have the student support, a lot that happened there from our lit coaches, adapting to student learning, providing activity packets, providing professional development for teachers. That fund also provides for some of the FTE for our middle school counselors, not all of them, but obviously really crucial support during these times. The communications funds also had to pivot during the pandemic, and so my office has supported a lot of work with the local public health authorities, both city and county level, making sure, and also state level, bringing the information to staff to understand the constantly shifting guidance that we're receiving from public health authorities and from educational and from our county ed office as we adapt to the pandemic and as the pandemic itself changes. We've also supported a lot of town halls and translation and interpretation, including our own district's interpreter for Spanish and language line in multiple languages. So that's going to be it, I'm afraid, for the annual report, but I do encourage folks to look at what's in the packet. A lot of details about what has been done with these incredibly important taxpayer funds. I do want to shift now to look at where we are currently. And what I did was, while you've got multiple pages on the first interim, I wanted to at least highlight some of the key areas for this year that BSEP is supporting and some changes that have occurred during this year. So again, whereas last year 134 FTE were supported, this year it's 135. And there are several additional FTE, additional positions that are supported through BSEP. Many of these have come into BSEP because of the need for the general fund to reduce expenses. Over the past few years, we've had 3 years in a row of significant budget cuts, I believe, amounting to about $8 million. And BSEP has been able to step in and at least take on some of the funding. So I've highlighted, for example, under classroom support, the universal ninth grade, BSEP started out funding 2 of the positions, now funds 5 out of the 5.6, has continued to fund additional support at Sylvia Mendez and Thousand Oaks. And then this year took on funding for existing positions, the Berkeley High Attendance Dean and the Berkeley High Student Activities Director, and had planned to be funding the 5 additional FTE for special ed teachers to reduce caseload, as well as a new 504 coordinator position. Those positions are currently not filled. We were unable to staff the 5.0, and the 504 coordinator, I believe, is currently posted and hopefully will be staffed, but that is, I want to flag that for the board, because when you see a significant fund balance in BSEP, it's partly due to unfilled positions. And then we also fund a number of, I'm not going to go line by line, but you can see a number of key positions. Expanded course offerings are the before and after school courses in middle and high school. And then a lot of important positions in PD have highlighted ones that are new to BSEP's funding. I'm gonna, whoops, I accidentally moved myself on, and why not? What I did was I broke down for you what would otherwise be very hard to read on a single screen. I took out this largest resource within BSEP, the class size reduction resource, also known as HQI, high quality instruction. That includes class size reduction and support for teaching. So I wanted the board to be aware of where we have the most significant fund balance. And that's, again, since 2/3 of the funds, so 2/3 of the 33 million, 32 million this year is almost 21 million. That was set aside to address class size goals. And these first three numbers here are what it costs us to staff to provide the teachers to bring class sizes to the ratios, which are in elementary about 23:1, and then higher in middle and high school. This is the cost, about 14 million. We also provide something called direct support. It's the cost of paying for the classrooms, essentially. And then substitute compensation is also considered part of planning for the number of FTE we needed. And then that leaves us, out of the 20 million, 5.6 million available to pay for all the other things: professional development, program evaluation, expanded course offerings, classroom support. And when we did that, as I mentioned, there was initially a plan to draw down on a significant fund balance by adding in about another 6 FTE, which would be $600,000 or $700,000. But with those positions not filled, it actually did not draw down on the fund balance very significantly. So the planned deficit spending didn't really happen to the extent that had been hoped for. And so what that does is leave us with a very significant ending fund balance right now, about $5 million. Those of you who are on the board or aware of the planning for the BSEP measure know that we did plan there should be a fund balance to carry us through the measure in the initial years. That in the prior BSEP measure, Measure A, in the last 2 years of that 10-year measure, we got to the point where expenses were exceeding revenues, and the general fund had to take back paying for things that BSEP had been paying for because BSEP no longer could do so. So we wanted to avoid that by front-loading a fund balance. And as you'll see, we're currently in year 4 of an 8-year measure. It's started in 2017. It'll expire 2024-25. So we have more of a fund balance than we expected, partly because of some of those expenditures that we weren't able to make, largely because of the COLA. And I'll look at that in just a moment, but I do want you to keep that in mind. But I also want you to know that one of the reasons that we also planned for that fund balance is that we knew as we were reducing elementary school class sizes or balancing, I should say, the 23:1 across K-5, that we would reach a point, and this year and next year is it, when we would have the lowest amount of FTE that we needed, because our K through 3 are larger than they used to be. They used to be 20:1, now they're about 22:1. And the 4th and 5th grades are larger, about 26:1. But this next year, Francisco Martinez, our admissions manager, has estimated we're going to need another 3 FTE as we start to bring down the 4th grade class sizes, for example, and then the 5th grade class sizes the year after that. So I expect another 3 FTE. So that's at about $100,000. That's going to draw down on our fund balance as well, and that's going to be ongoing. I also want to just take a quick look at where we are with the other funds, but it may look like we have some significant fund balances there, but you'll see that actually the deficit spending is taking care of that. So Music VAPA, which currently has a fund balance of about 842,000, is being drawn down at a rate of 162,000 this year. And if you think about what that, if we have to do that for 4 more years, then our ending fund balance, if we don't have significantly increased revenues, is essentially taken care of. And music and VAPA is actually another one where, with 4th and 5th grade classes becoming smaller classes, we may need more staffing there as well. Libraries also have a fund balance, 500,000, also being drawn down upon. Could be there's a little room there for some additional projects or expenses, but not a lot. Instructional technology has really taken a hit. We had some funds in Measure A, which we've expended entirely. And you can see that the deficit spending there is actually at that rate not sustainable, and something we're going to have to look at as we work with our new Director of Technology about what we can afford to pay for. And then these are the last elements of BSEP. We have what's called effective student support. As I mentioned, student achievement strategies. Lit coaches are a big chunk of that. And we again have a fund balance which is being drawn down upon. And there may be a little wiggle room there, but not a lot. And then counseling and behavioral health, it's mostly middle school counselors that are being paid for. And we don't provide all of the FTE at all of the middle schools, but we contribute to it. And that has a fund balance, which is also being drawn down upon. Last but not least, oversight and public information does have a significant fund balance. That's also due to understaffing. We used to have a significant contract in there to support the communications office. It's a very tiny office, me and the public information officer essentially. But we did not manage to get a contract this year. And so that fund balance actually grew rather than being drawn down upon, but at the expense of a lot of work that we that's being carried that we need to do some additional staffing explorations for. And then let me just give you a second with the former measure, BSEP Measure A, which still has some fund balance. And the way that that works is you can only expend funds from the prior measure for the purposes for which they were initially designated. You can't sweep them. The purposes, though, are very closely aligned to what we still do. There's a little bit left in the high quality instruction. And we can draw upon that, but and imagine that will be gone by next year. The site funds almost always carry a fund balance, but each of those fund balances belongs to the site. We can't take it away. Music and VAPA has been drawing down on its fund balance from the prior measure primarily for purchase of instruments, particularly larger and more expensive instruments. Libraries is using their funds for materials and supplies. We have some concerns about whether books that were borrowed are going to be returned, so I imagine that is going to be needed. The Office of Family Engagement, which is now funded through LCAP, it still has some remaining funds in BSEP, and those are being used to support non-staffing expenses like phones, workshops, things like that. Technology money is all gone. Professional development money is almost all gone, and program evaluation is almost all gone as well. So not much there that we can draw upon. And then I think this is my second to the last slide, just to show you that, so Assistant Superintendent Follensby was talking about the COLAs that she's been working with. The parcel tax COLAs currently work with a different COLA. It's derived from the annualized Bay Area cost, consumer price index. And that's sometimes larger and sometimes smaller than what we get from the state. When we created the BSEP measure and we were creating various models to try to figure out how much funds were needed in order to support class size, for example, we modeled it based on a 1.2% COLA, and that at the time seemed like the right thing to do, because the 3 prior years, the COLAs had been, I think, 0, 0.85 and 1.4, I think. And so 1.2 seemed like a reasonable model, but of course, cannot predict the future. And it turned out that actually that first year there would have been a 3.5 COLA, but we did not apply that as the measure said we wouldn't raise the tax in the first year. We applied a 2.9 COLA, not as large as the state COLA, but still larger than 1.2, a very significant COLA in 2019-20 last year, which increased our capacity for programs. And then the current year 2.5, and next year is going to be 2.0, so actually less than what we're looking at for that combined COLA. So that's not going to bring in a whole lot of new revenues, actually, once you deal with required expenses. But this is what I'm working with now with all of the managers of the funds. So we're going into now our planning cycle, and each manager, libraries, music, technology, etc., is given their allocation based on that 2% estimate and after expenses. So, and then the indirect costs, which actually go to the district as essentially overhead, is what we're going to be looking at. And I will over the next couple of months be bringing a series of plans to the board for their approval, and we'll be taking into account, of course, the various needs of the district, both one-time and ongoing. So that's the end of the presentation, and the just questions, whether there are questions from the board as to how the current revenue can be used, both from Measure E1 or from fund balances from Measure A. And I'll stop sharing now.
Great. Thank you so much. These are some information-packed presentations. Thank you, Director Berry. Thank you so much for your leadership of BSEP. So let me ask my colleagues if they have thoughts or questions they'd like to ask.
I don't have any questions, so to speak. I just wanted to thank you and the BSEP Oversight Committee for all the hard work you put into making sure that these funds are spent towards the true purpose as outlined by the voters and the taxpayers. And then I want to say, when we get to the mental health buckets and the support for struggling students, that we really need to be thinking critically and much more differently than we may have in the past as we come out of COVID-19 on how we can really utilize those resources to be as effective as possible. I know we always strive to do that, but we may need some more creative energy and creative thought into serving the additional need of our student population. And then one of my favorite takeaways from when I was on the BSEP P&O committee was that the voters' #1 concern was support for struggling students. And so I just always want to keep that at the forefront in our future planning and spending. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Babbitt. Director Vasudev.
And thanks, President Alpert. Yes, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It was great to see how thoughtful, the team has been in thinking of like how to adapt our programs to distance learning, right, and all the different changes. I really enjoyed the recent conversation at P&O about just the library books and what are we going to do with the materials that aren't returned. I wanted to ask you, what are the plans for that additional position, that the unfilled communications position? And I know that we've had these like talks in the district about, more culturally competent outreach, especially right now, because it's so difficult to reach all of our, monolingual families within the district. So I just wanted to know, like, what are the plans for that unfilled position? What will it look like?
Yeah, and we don't have a position, thank you, Director Vasudev. We don't have a position description per se. It's been in the past filled through a contract because it really was project-based to fill in, taking on things like the A+ News and the annual report. But we were very fortunate that we used to have someone who was bilingual Spanish speaking. And I believe that's one of the critical elements that we need as we increase the capacity of the tiny department. I did speak with HR this morning about the possibility of creating it as a part-time position. It's not, we don't have enough funding for a full position, but maybe for a half-time position, a communications specialist of some kind. And I would envision that bilingual in Spanish would be a key element of that position.
Thank you so much. We're on the same page, so thank you.
Dr. Sinai.
Thank you, Director Berry. That was a very thorough, as always expected, report from you. And I don't have a lot of specific questions. I did want to just maybe check in with Associate Superintendent Tiara about when you're coming back, or not coming back, but when you'll come and talk to us about the 5% recruitment and retention program of the BIRA. Because I was interested in the numbers and looking at the first report, but there is no description of like what besides salaries and benefits, what that's paying for. So I think Natasha mentioned that you would be coming with, someone's coming with the presentation.
Yes, that would be Assistant Superintendent Tobias Espinosa.
Oh, Tobias Espinosa. Oh, okay, all right. And so yeah, so I look forward to hearing that presentation to see, because it's such, again, kind of going based on what the voters are supporting our work in, is really looking at how we're using those funds to recruit and retain, particularly our hard to hire employees. So I look forward to that. So thank you for all your work and the work of the P&O and the presentation during public comment.
I had a very quick question, Director Berry. Based on past planning and experience, when would we start the planning process for the next BSET measure?
Oh, yes. Well, tomorrow, pretty soon. I came into this position in 2012, in mid-late 2012, and one of the questions asked of me was whether I was ready to start working on the measure for 2016. And in fact, in 2013, we began some initial discussions around what the next measure needs might be. And we really, of course, the most intensive work was 2014 and 2015. But very, very, very soon, we should be having those discussions. And we have been at the cabinet level, been talking about some of the elements that we may need to consider for the next measure, but that does need to get into high gear next year.
Okay, next calendar year?
This coming school year.
Coming school year.
Year 2021, what year are we? 21, 22.
21, 22, okay. Great, any other questions? I don't see any. Thank you so much, Director Berry. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we'll move to item 12.3, and Dr. Shelley, is this you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have Dr. Shelley. We're doing an update on our homeless outreach program for education. So I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you very much.
And sorry, Dr. Shelley, maybe you could introduce yourself too to the community, because you're experienced with us already, but still relatively new.
Yeah, so my name is Philip Shelley. I'm the Director of Student Services. I've been with the district since October 1st. I came from Vallejo City Unified School District, where I worked in the same position as Director of Student Services for the prior 7 years, and have been in education for a total of 20 years, first as a classroom teacher, and then as a vice principal, and then a coordinator, and then a director. So that's been my path.
We're thrilled to have you in the district.
Thank you, sir. So I believe Michelle will be handling the slide deck for me.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. So good evening, governing board, staff, and community. Thank you for allowing me to me and Ms. Royal to present to you information about the district's McKinney-Vento program, known as HOPE, which stands for Homeless Outreach Program for Education. Next slide, please. Now, the McKinney-Vento Act is a federal law that ensures the rights of students to go to school even when they are homeless or don't have a permanent address. The act aims to reduce barriers that have prevented many homeless youth from enrolling, attending, and succeeding in school, including transportation, residency requirements, and documentation requirements, such as birth certificates and medical records. Okay, so now when we talk about housing, what is fixed, regular, and adequate housing? A fixed residence is one that is stationary, permanent, and not subject to change. A regular residence is one that is used on a normal, standard, and consistent basis. And an adequate residence is one that is sufficient for meeting both the physical and psychological needs of students in their home environments. Now, examples of homelessness include children and youth living in shared housing due to economic hardship, motels or hotels, public or private places not designed for sleeping, some trailer parks and campgrounds, cars parked and abandoned buildings, shelters, and emergency or transitional shelters. Additional examples of homelessness include children and youth who are migratory children who qualify as homeless, children abandoned in hospitals, and unaccompanied homeless youth. Now, unaccompanied homeless youth is defined as a child or youth who meets the McKinney-Vento definition and is not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. Next slide, please. Now, we know that there are times when families do not have documents typically required for enrollment. The McKinney-Vento students are to be enrolled immediately, however, even without documents. So the HOPE coordinator, again, that's Melody, can assist with obtaining these documents after students are enrolled and attending school. She also helps to ensure that students are able to attend their school of origin. Now, the school of origin is the last school of attendance or the school the student attended for the longest period of time, or a school attended in the last 15 months that the student feels connected to. Melody also ensures that McKinney-Vento students are enrolled in a free and reduced meal program and works to remove barriers, including transportation, if students need uniforms or need learning materials, reading materials, etc. Next slide, please. So now we'll begin to talk about how many McKinney-Vento students have been identified this year who qualify for the McKinney-Vento. Now, as you can see, it spans all of the grades, but in particular, you'll see the highest concentration of students who qualify for McKinney-Vento in our high schools, where there are 23 ninth graders, 14 10th graders, 24 11th graders, and 32 seniors. So that's where we see the highest concentration is at the secondary, but again, it is spread out throughout the grades in the district. Next slide, please. Now, this next slide gives a breakdown of students by race and ethnicity. And as you can see, the larger percentage of students who have been identified for McKinney-Vento services are Black African-American with 124 students. There have been 55 Latinx students, 23 students who list 2 or more races, 12 white students, and then 2 American Indian or Alaska Native, and 1 Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. Of these students, 16 are English language learners, and 80 students are currently receiving special education services. Next slide, please. Now let's look at attendance. Now this attendance is from late September to December. Now the elementary students are presented on the attendance by day, while the middle school and high school students are presented by period. You'll see the acronyms to the right. SYP stands for synchronous present. ASP is for asynchronous present. PARS for partial, and of course, absent equals absent. Now for elementary students, when we look at the average number of days missed during that time frame for non-McKinney-Vento students, it's 1.6 compared to our McKinney-Vento students, which is 6.4 absent days missed during that time frame. For middle school students, again, we're going by period absences. So for non-McKinney-Vento students, it's 7.9 period absences during that time frame, compared to the average number of missed periods being 23 for McKinney-Vento students. And then for high school, the number for non-McKinney-Vento students is 5.9 average missed periods, compared to 16.2 average missed periods for the McKinney-Vento students. Now, if you were to look and take these periods on a 6-period day, you will see that for the high school students, it's a little over a day. And then for the middle schools, or for the high school students, it's equivalent of, or actually it's equivalent of about 2.5 days. It's actually closer to 4 days for middle school. So you can compare that when you look at the number of missed days, but again, we calculate it by period. Next slide, please. Now let's look at some academic data, and we'll use the STAR data. So the blue is for math and the red is for reading, and the circles are for non-McKinney-Vento and the squares are for McKinney-Vento students. And as you can see, there is a gap between how well our non-McKinney-Vento students and our McKinney-Vento students are performing on the STAR in reading and math. However, the gap is more pronounced in reading than in math. Additionally, the gap in reading appears to grow wider at the higher grade levels, with the exception of the 7th grade. And in math, the gap stays relatively consistent across the grade levels. So we can see the gap in achievement between the McKinney-Vento students and our non-McKinney-Vento students. Next slide, please. This next slide looks at the A through F grade distribution for 10th through 12th grade students during the first semester of last year versus the first semester of this year, 2021. And the percentage of Fs, if you look at the grade distribution, the percentage of Fs that McKinney-Vento students have received has increased, which is troubling. However, at the same time, the percentage of A's and B's has also increased during this same time. And the C's and D's have decreased from last year to this year. What it appears to me is where the McKinney-Vento students are struggling, they continue to struggle even more. And where they're doing well, they've continued to do well in some of those areas. But the next step is to examine the data specifically to see where the McKinney-Vento students are having the most challenges in what courses. Next slide, please. Now, Melody has made, our Hope Counselor has made approximately 800 contacts this year so far with our McKinney-Vento students and their families. And in her contacts, several themes have emerged as concerns for our McKinney-Vento housing. Some include housing insecurity, technology, academic supports, and mental health support. Now, to date, 5 of our McKinney-Vento families have been able to find stable housing. 86% of our Hope students have received a Chromebook and or hotspot. 35% of our Hope students have been referred to continuum support teams, and 18% of our Hope students have been referred or are currently receiving mental health supports in the district. Next, let me continue. Additionally, Student Services, OFFE, and the Admissions Office has worked collaboratively to streamline the registration process for our McKinney-Vento rising 6th grade students and our rising 9th grade McKinney-Vento students. And so, for example, for the rising 9th grade McKinney-Vento students, they'll be automatically rolled over to the high school, and then Melody will work with the families to meet with the counselors to select their electives, as well as complete the emergency cards. Nothing else will be required for those students to be registered. And for our rising 6th graders who are McKinney-Vento, they'll also be rolled over to the next school after working with Melody to complete the school preference form and then the emergency card. And for those students also, nothing else is required for registration. And so that's some of the work, again, that Student Services, OFFE, and Admissions Office collaborated on to remove that barrier of registration for our McKinney-Vento students. Next slide, please. Now, Melody is going to go next, and she's going to talk about how she supports our McKinney-Vento students and her collaboration and referrals with our community partners.
Thank you and good evening. So when I meet with families to do the enrollment process, I want to make sure that they are enrolled in 211. 211 is Alameda County's way to any housing options that may be out there. So I work with them to make sure they're in 211. I also check in to make sure they have food, to let them know where the food resources are in the community. We talk about medical, if they're connected with Medi-Cal. If they're not connected with Medi-Cal, I can refer them to Lifelong Medical. Talk about clothing they may need. And also I do work with the cost teams to check on their attendance, the students' attendance, and their grades. Next slide, please. So we have community partners that were started last June, and these are a list of our partners. The ones that we work mainly with is the Women's Daytime Drop-In Center. This opportunity is very unique to Berkeley. They are our own 211. So when Berkeley families need housing resources, they can go to the Women's Daytime Drop-In Center. They can do the interview and the intake all at one place. And that very much streamlines their access to housing options. We also have partners with various agencies that provide food, medical, legal advice. And Yay and Dreamcatchers are where our unaccompanied minors are sheltered. And Youth Spirits Artworks works with our students to work on their life skills. Thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. So in continuing the work of student services, we'll continue to identify HOPE eligible students, provide support services for our HOPE students and their families, build on the collaboration between the school district and our community partners to remove barriers. We're working on putting systems in place to increase the student service department's efficiency and effectiveness so that we can better serve our students in the community. And then we'll be going into full integration into the Infinite Campus, which will be the new student information system that the district will be using. Additionally, the Ed Services Department is currently developing strategies for more targeted interventions for our McKinney-Vento students. So now this concludes our presentation. Thank you for allowing us to provide you with this information, and we will take any questions if you have any for us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shelley and Ms. Royal, for the presentation and for all the work you do with our most vulnerable kids. I had one question, which was, and I guess this is for both of you. What do you need? What can, if we have the resources, particularly one-time resources, but potentially, significant resources if we want to invest them in our McKinney-Vento kids. What do you need? What could we be doing better if we had more resources?
Well, I think that I'll let Melody answer from her perspective, but I believe that one of the things that we want to be able to do is be able to reach more students and be able to provide education for their parents around the McKinney-Vento Act and what support services that we can provide. We know that there are many families out there that we are not aware of that they may qualify for McKinney-Vento services, and they might not be aware as well. And so we really want to do a better job of getting that information out to the community, going out where the families are at. And then once we get them in, we'll be able to provide that level of support, which may include individualized planning for the students or providing supports in other areas. I think one of the biggest things that the board can do with us is help us to collaborate with our community partners or the city of Berkeley as we look for the best possible things that we can do to support those students. So it's an ongoing process for the department as we examine the available resources.
What about you, Ms. Royal? What would you say? What's on your wish list?
Houses, apartments,
Yeah.
But just to continue to work, we have very good community partners, and to just find the students and families that we are missing, because like Dr. Shelley said, we know they're out there.
And is the reason we can't find everybody and reach everybody is because of capacity in the office, that there's only you? Or what's the barrier to reaching more families and kids who could benefit from these services?
I think that right now, especially during COVID, we have families that don't even know they're eligible.
And how would we reach them?
So I would say that part of it is again, knowing where the families in Berkeley, where they go, getting information out there, whether it's posters or flyers, communicating with families through email, also updating information on the webpage. And then also when we have community forums or different events, going to those events to be able to share information about the program. So really it's about just getting as much information into the hands of the community as possible. And then part of it, some families may feel uncomfortable even disclosing that they may qualify for McKinney-Vento. So some of it also is trust building with the community so that they understand that you're really there to support them. Everything that you do with those families is confidential. And then that way, again, it's all about building trust so that you can be able to support the family. So it does take some time to do that, to build up that trust, but it's something that we have to be invested in doing because it's so important.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that moment and say thank you for your work and for your service and for this detailed presentation, and then for your look towards providing additional targeted services. From my perspective, a thing that I believe would really help, and the last point you made, is if we could get an on-site social worker in our district. And I don't know how we partner with our health department or Alameda County to do that, but that would be a huge need. And we also can expand our Office of Family Engagement and Equity just for those relationship building needs. And that is why most of the parents are asking for one worker at every school. So you have that relationship and you're not ashamed to say, hey, I need help, because I'm not talking to the district, I'm talking to this person whom I know cares about me. And so to that regard, those would be my two suggestions to help provide support for our families in this area. And also looking at the fact that a majority of our families in the McKinney-Vento program were identified as African-American, really making sure that we look at our ASI rubric that we have, and regardless of people's feelings about it, it really is the way to help us figure out where to direct targeted services, right? So I really appreciate what you said about disaggregating that data to figure out where exactly those resources need to be provided so that we can provide targeted supports. So can you tell me a little bit more about, give me a little bit more details about the targeted support that you're providing, be it academically or primarily academically at this point, is what I'd like to know about.
All right, so most of the work in terms of the interventions, academic interventions, take place at the site. Melody participates in all the COS team meetings as they develop plans of support for the different McKinney-Vento students who are needing support. Melody outreaches to families on the regular in her check-ins that she does with the families to determine what it is they need, but we try to be as specific as possible in how we provide those supports, which is one of the reasons why the Ed Services Department right now, just within the last several weeks, has been starting to look at individual students. So in this case, we're talking about looking at our seniors, for example, and seeing where our seniors, how they fail in the first semester in terms of their courses, and then providing some interventions for those students. So that's something that we're looking at right now and developing. And so we'll continue to develop a strategy of support for the seniors, but then we understand that, the senior, started in kindergarten. So we want to make sure that we catch our students early where they need the support so that that gap I spoke about in reading and math in elementary on the STAR data looks a little bit different. And then the outcomes for the students are different by the time they get to high school. But most of the work, again, is done at the site, and Melody provides the referral to resources within the school, the different schools.
Director Vasudev.
Wait, I thank you very much.
Sorry.
I just wanted one follow-up comment. Just wanted one follow-up comment to say regarding the support for our students and plugging them in. Really being above what we already do with our cost services team, right? But how do you dig a little deeper and provide the support that the barriers to learning really needs, right? That's just, it's a higher level of support needed, and just making sure that you all also educate our educators who are on those cost teams about some of the hardships and difficulties, because they may not have any kind of relationship to that or any kind of direct experience to that. So how do we continue to humanize it so that we actually really meet the needs of this population in a different way? Actually, a different comment, but Ty made me lose it. So slow down a little bit, Ty. Give me a second. All right, thanks.
Okay, Director Vasudev.
Thanks. Julie, I think your hand was up first. Director Sinai, do you want to go first? Thanks so much for that presentation, Dr. Shelley and Ms. Royal. I really appreciated it. My question was, do you know how many McKinney-Vento students are enrolled in our small cohorts right now at the 3 sites? Do you know that breakdown?
Yeah, I don't have that. I don't have that number off the top, but there's something I can get for you. I can go back and get that number for you.
Yeah, I'd be curious just to know out of the, the total number of students. Can you remind me of the total again, Dr. Shelley?
217 have been identified.
Yeah, I think I'd be curious to see that breakdown, to see how many we're serving in person now. Another question that I wanted to ask, and it's just more like a comment, and I think you said this, Dr. Shelley, that we really do need to do a better job working with our city partners, right? So that they know, like community organizations and city partners, so that they know about this program. And so I wanted to know, do we work with our rent commissioners? Do we work with the rent board here in Berkeley? Are they well versed about this program?
I'll let Melody take that answer.
I attend the city meeting for housing, but not the rent board. They're not.
That group strikes me as, one of the elected bodies that I think would be good to start, working with, or to form some kind of relationship with. And then one of the things that stood out, and this is my last comment, Dr. Shelley, is how much the absences jump from elementary school to middle school. Do you know why there is that jump? Like what's, why that difference?
Yeah, we would have to take a deeper dive into the data, but just what I know from research, obviously students who are McKinney-Vento eligible have a variety of barriers that they experience, or a variety of risk factors, and the number of risk factors that they have increase the likelihood that they'll miss school. And being homeless or being doubled up, for example, rises the level of risk factors. And so really it's about determining what those risk factors are, and then tailoring support to remove those barriers that the risk factors exhibit. So we'd have to do a deeper dive to see why the increase from elementary to middle, but then there was also a decrease from middle to high school in amount of time. So again, that would just take a deeper dive into the data to see what it reveals.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and then my last comment is that I do think that there's a lot of families that we're not catching, and how we're doing just multilingual outreach about this is really important, and acknowledging the stigma that exists in different demographics, right, about identifying as homeless. There was a year my parents moved to Florida, and there was a hurricane, Hurricane Andrew, and we were left homeless. I don't think my parents ever would have identified as homeless, but essentially we were living with relatives. We couldn't find housing. There's a hurricane. So I feel like, trying to dig a little deeper, and I did like Director Babbitt's suggestion of, trying to capitalize more on the expansion of OFI to try to do that, but also in a culturally competent and responsive way, in a multilingual way. Thank you.
Thanks. Dr. Sinai.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and for all your work. And Dr. Shelley, thanks for jumping into, probably the most challenging population that we have in the most challenging time that we've got. And Ms. Royal, I really want to appreciate all of the work that you did, continue to do, but really did over the spring and summer months to try to find housing for so many of our families that that were in crisis. And without the support of the Berkeley Public Schools Fund, we wouldn't have been able to house those folks for a number of couple of months, I think. And then, we were able to negotiate and advocate with the city of Berkeley to fund some extension of those hotel vouchers. So my question is, and I've been at this now for way too many years and too many rounds and too much turnover, not just turnover in the district, but in the city, of really finding the appropriate people in the city of Berkeley to be champions and partners in this. So much of the city of Berkeley homeless services go to chronic individuals, chronically homeless individuals who have desperate needs without a doubt, but our homeless families are hidden in the citywide data for the reasons, of definitions and et cetera. So there's a new, not so new in COVID life, director, of Housing, Health, and Community Services, Lisa Varus, who is very rooted in the district, has a long history of working in the district. And so I'm curious as to whether we've been able to develop a relationship with her yet, kind of in the time of COVID. And if not, if there's any assistance that I or any of the other council members can help in kind of, again, setting up another meeting with some of our elected officials and our city departments to see how we can get on the same page with this. So that's an offer. We don't need to go into discussion on it. But the other question I had, well, two questions. One is the number of homeless individual students are the 217, I think you said. How many families does that represent? Do you know?
I'd have to, well, Melody keeps a running tab, so she I don't know if she'll be able to answer it. It may be a question we may have to get back to you on just as we look, but we do know that we have a number of families where you'll see multiple children on her list. But we just would have to look and see the exact number of families to be able to answer that question for you.
That'd be great, Melody. If you've got, you can shoot me an email or anything. So I think when we've had this conversation about kids needing to be back in school, this I think is like the highest priority of students who we need to get into the cohorts. We need to get onto campuses. And so I'm very eager to hear more about, Melody, you guys can't be the 2-person or 1-person case management show. So how our OFI staff are really working and identifying how the cause teams are, because the data shows it and our personal experience show it that these kids really need to be engaged. And so I would, top of the list, what we need to do, given the demographics, we've got to get these kids in with caring adults who are going to be able to support them in their education and social emotional and help their families, in whatever ways we can. So thank you in any way that any of us, can help and build bridges. Let me know.
Thank you.
Director Miller.
Yeah, I was gonna mention what Director Sinai said about these kids being the exact demographic that could really benefit with our cohorted education we're providing on campus, especially thinking about the barriers they face when we do in-person learning with being homeless. Just finding an environment to be able to sit down with a computer, I would imagine is practically impossible. So we need to keep that in mind, and we should use this as a reason to further expand our in-person cohorts.
All right. Dr. Shelley, Ms. Royal, thank you so much for being with us tonight and for your presentation. We really appreciate it and all your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to move to our final item before we are going to have a final public comment period at the end of our meeting. But we have one more item, which is an action item to approve the allocation of facilitation support for the EL master plan. And I'll turn it over to you, Director Sinclair, in a minute. I think that my understanding from Dr. Stevens is that the sort of approach that you all wanted to take with this item is similar to the one that we did with respect to the middle school assignment plan a couple meetings ago, where what staff is asking us to do is approve the allocation for the funding for facilitation and perhaps provide some direction on the scope of the sort of project, but that it'll also come back to us at a later meeting for sort of approval of the whole scope, so that we're not deciding that tonight, but staff is hoping that we will approve the allocation for the facilitation. Is that your understanding?
That's accurate.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
I make the motion to move to approve.
Say that again?
Can we go right to the motion to move to approve?
Well, there's a short presentation and then we'll have the discussion and entertain the motion.
Okay.
So Director Sinclair, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, and it is brief, I promise.
Okay.
Yeah, we've seen it.
But I do want to give you an overview of our thinking right now around the English Learner Master Plan. So this is a great opportunity for us. I'm Michelle Sinclair. I'm the Director of State, Federal, and Special Programs. I'm here just to go over the plan that our laid out plan right now for a revision of the English Learner Master Plan. So my brief presentation is going to cover just the decision to write the master plan in relation to the previous plan, the stakeholders who will be involved, and including the advisory groups and working groups, and then the timeline for completion, including the draft final plan projected completion date, which we're hoping to be December of 2021. So the previous English Learner Master Plan was written in 2013. Since then, there have been a lot of changes for English learners. The state has introduced new ELD standards and an ELD framework. That was back in 2015. Another significant change is the new assessment system for both initial testing and summative assessment called the LPAC, and that was introduced in 2018. So this revision is definitely overdue. The new plan will include the following 6 sections, and I'm going to explain a little bit on how we're going to break those down. The master plan revisions will have oversight by stakeholder groups. They will serve as an advisory role, including school board, the DLAC committee, Latinx Unidos of Berkeley, as well as other community member stakeholder groups. The groups will have opportunities to review the data on our English learners, understand our programs for English learners, receive information on our policies, and receive updates and give feedback throughout the process of the new plan. So the internal work groups will be part of the plan, and they'll be involved in writing, the actual writing of the plan. We see these stakeholders as participating in groups dedicated to specific sections of the plan, and then reporting back to the larger working teams and stakeholder groups. So who's included on this list are district administrators, site administrators, ELD teachers, teachers from a variety of grade levels, all the way kinder through high school, actually TK through high school, teachers who focus on areas of instruction, and then our Office of Family Engagement and Equity, of course. The plans to revise the master plan in 2 phases, phase 1 being this spring, February to June, and then phase 2 being next fall, August to December. I do anticipate summer work as well, but the goal is for completion of the entire plan to have a draft final plan by the end of November, beginning of December, and then bringing it to stakeholders at that point. For phase 1, the work will begin with identifying key working group members, holding a meeting for that group as well as stakeholder group meetings, review the previous plan, determine specific focus area groups, and then set committee goals. We'll focus on 2 sections of the master plan in phase 1. It includes section 1, which is identification, assessment, and placement. We're anticipating that that will be a lot of internal research and working group on that. So we are hoping we can get that done. And I feel like it's a really important starting place too. And then also we're hoping to address the funding issues so that we're ready to continue on into the next year. So that's an important first step. And then in phase 2, August through December, and like I alluded to, I'm hoping to do a little work over the summer with working groups on these, because these are really the meaty sections. They include section 2, instructional programs, curricular areas, section 3, monitoring student progress and reclassification, section 4, community engagement, section 5, evaluation and accountability. The goal for phase 2 is to have the final draft plan completed by December, as I said before, and to review the final draft plan during December. So for our next step, we are asking the board for approval of contracted services in support of revision of the EL master plan. One thing I want to add is that I do think that what's really important and what I saw with our last plan was once this plan is established, I think we need to have a really solid plan for how we're going to roll the master plan out. And particularly with all teachers, because I think it's really important that all teachers are communicated really clearly about what the expectations are.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sinclair. Questions, comments, Dr. Vasudev?
Thank you, Director Sinclair. I know you've been working really hard behind the scenes, you and the staff. So I really appreciate you putting this together so quickly and very thoroughly. I have just a question because I think, when we talk about this plan, first, yes, I'm very supportive of, funding a robust community engagement process for it. But when we talk about this plan, it can mean so many different things to different stakeholder groups, right? And so one of the things that I think is really key as part of the June deliverables is that we all kind of get on the same page for like what the vision is behind this work, right? And why it's important. And so, some things that you mentioned, which I agree with, is that, it's super overdue, right? It's very long overdue. But for me, what I see this plan is really as, guidance around policies and procedures for how our programs are serving English language learners and how we can serve them consistently throughout the district, right? Like, how do we make these programs consistent? So a couple of questions that I have for you is, one, can the work in phase 1, right, before June, include kind of consensus building on a vision? Because I think that's really important or else it's going to come up in the later part of the community engagement, which at that point, we're not going to be able to work through some of the meaty issues that you pointed out in the slides for, phase 2, like reclassification, if we're kind of not all on the same page with the vision. So that's kind of, can we do some kind of consensus building around the vision for this before June? Then can we have a section that really looks at programmatic evaluation? Like, how are our programs right now and kind of what are the gaps? And one of the things that I think is really important is to survey both, educators. Yes, we definitely need educators in the room, but also parents, right? And I think, what we're hearing from the community is that this population of parents in particular, whether they're at the TWI program or whether they're in DLAC or whether, they're in their ELI groups, they're really concerned about how their children are performing. And so they're very opinionated. And I want to make sure that we're surveying the parents and, kind of explaining them and bringing them along. Like, these are the big bucket areas that we're thinking that we're going to focus on. But what else is there? Like, programmatically, what are we missing? What can we improve on? And so that's really important. And yeah, like for the different stakeholder groups, I liked when you included like that, the difference between the internal stakeholder groups and the external stakeholder groups. But I want to make sure that we don't have just like one representative from Latinos Unidos or just one representative from the TWI program, right? Like, we need lots of different representatives from the TWI program, from, English language learners at different sites, and making sure that they're Latinx and also Arabic speaking parents, so that, we're bringing a variety of wide diversity of ELL parents. So those are some of my high level points. So program evaluation, where does that fit in? Consensus on the sections and high level visioning before June and consensus around that.
Okay, yeah, those are some really great points. Thank you for pointing those out. But I also am really grateful that we are not hurrying on this process, because I think that this first spring time can really be dedicated to gathering information, because those two sections, we purposely chose those two sections because they're kind of rudimentary. It's like, how do you enroll? And I know there can be a lot of controversy around those areas. I do think another really important piece of this, and I'm working with Dr. Stevens on this, and he's really, spearheading the direction of this. But I think that identifying what is our TWI and bilingual or whatever, no longer bilingual, but the idea of heritage programs, how is that different from the EL master plan, and where does that belong? I think that a lot of that is going to need to get worked out too before we begin the work. But I agree with you. I'd like to reach out. It is actually, when you look at the duties of the district English language Advisory Committee, DLAC, that is one of the duties to oversee our master plan. And so I would really like them to be have active engagement in this process. And, possibly even get more members if we could. But that I see that group as being really pivotal as part of this. And that group does include English learners from a different variety of languages spoken and also from the TWI program.
But that's just one. Yeah, sorry, Director Sinclair. Finish your thought and then I'll.
No, go ahead. I hear what you're saying. You want a broader span, right?
Yeah, this was historically a really broad effort. And so, I've talked to people, I wasn't around for the 2013 version of this, but I know this was a really broad group and it can't just live in that group. Like that group has so much to cover, bringing the parents. I went to the joint PAC and DLAC meeting, just bringing, and you remember the prep that went before that joint meeting to just kind of get the parents along this, all the slides and all the really, a lot of this can be very regulatory. And I feel like just, going through this really meaty plan just in that group is not going to get us to where we need to be. It needs to be broader. It needs to be more similar to the one that we had before.
I'm sure Dr. Stevens will be signed on to that. I don't want to speak for him, but he's a big community and town hall kind of superintendent, right?
Oh, sorry, I'm not on mute. I'm just laughing.
I think Director.
I'm not on mute. I was gonna just say, the Parent Advisory Committee was not listed as one of those groups, and they're a part of supporting English language learners in the LCAP supplemental funds. And then I want to make sure that in the plan that we address biases in our equity rubric and how those attributes are going to really play a role in making sure that that the success of these students is at the forefront.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, because I originally had PAC as part of the groups. And then I thought, oh my gosh, we've got so much work to do in PAC. I don't but yeah, we, unduplicated English learners are a part of the unduplicated quotient. So it is important. Thanks.
Dr. Sinai. You're muted.
Thank you for your presentation. And I also really want to appreciate and thank Director Vasudev for, leading this charge. And I think, those of us who've been around for a little bit, Director Leva Cutler was passionate about this and continues to be. And I think, Director Vasudev, you've carried the baton well. And I just want to kind of reiterate the importance of the community engagement at both levels of the plan, at the first stage as well as the second stage. And so I have a question, because I don't know if I heard you right. I think I didn't. So I just want to clarify it, because when you look at the list of the internal stakeholders, it's heavy, it's long, it's a lot of administrative and teaching staff. And, I just know from, our years doing LCAP, where we have the education advisory group and you have the parent advisory group, we need to make sure that the community advisory group is as strong and robust as the staff group. And that the community folks, they have a different perspective, but a very much lived experience of how these systems are impacting their kids' lives. So you had mentioned something about doing the research. And I think it was in the second stage, but doing the research and then presenting to the stakeholders when you've got the final draft. And I think I misheard that. So I'm kind of curious on your thinking about how, is this an iterative process where there's, some research done, some chewing it together with the community, some more work done, some community versus kind of the staff doing the research, making a proposal, and then getting feedback? I'm just curious of what your thoughts.
Well, the beauty of doing it in stages is that working on it, this is a vision, right? And it's not concrete yet. But I do envision going to groups. I've been getting a lot of feedback just from DLAC. We've been talking about a few of the things that would go into the master plan, and parents' voices is really, really important. And so I envision going to stakeholder groups, gathering information, getting feedback, and then bringing that to the working groups. The reason there's so many people on the working group list is because that would be divided into 6 sections. So we wouldn't have everybody engaged in every section of that master plan, but I do need workers, like people who will actually write the plan. And also will need engagement with teachers who are signed on for this. So that's part of the whole working concept. But I do also think it's essential that we pull in, we report back to stakeholder groups, and then we pull in information that they're giving us back in response, particularly for certain sections of it, like reclassification. I think that's a really important area where we want to get a lot of feedback on monitoring our RFEP students. But there's other areas like that too.
Yeah, and I think, part of it is there's a passive feedback, and then there's a way to kind of be genuinely engaged and have it. And I think part of that is I totally support the facilitator, and getting a facilitator who actually can really learn, who's good at engaging families from different cultures, and the like, that can be informative. And I'm hoping that we look at TWI and the Heritage program. I know less about the Heritage program, not just as programs, but they're supposed to be avenues in which to have English language learners excel and succeed. So to see it not as part of the master plan seems to me a little bit like that could be short-sighted, because again, kind of having both my kids went through the two-way immersion program, and they were not English learners, right? We didn't develop that program originally so that English speakers could learn Spanish. We did it because we thought the two-way immersion helps native Spanish speakers become fluent and biliterate and bilingual by bringing the cultures together. So I did tell Dr. Stevens that I'm looking forward to some data that compares our EL learners who've gone through 6 or 7 years of the TWI compared to EL learners who haven't, to see whether we actually, if the two-way immersion program is actually working to help make our English language support our English language learners in being bilingual and biliterate. So I see them as part of the plan, not as just programs that we do. So
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. My point was just that I don't want to, we can't get bogged down in like enrollment into the TWI program. Of course, English learners have that option to go into the program, but do you know what I mean? It's a lot, and this is going to be a lot to bite off in 2 semesters. I still even think 2 semesters is tight. So I want to be sure we get it done.
Director Vasudev.
Hi, just really quickly, and I want to just echo a lot of what Director Sinai said. It's really important that we have a culturally responsive facilitator who has specific experience working with English language learners, right? And so who the facilitator is key to making sure that this work is done right. And I think, in terms of looking at the programs, right, I think it's important that we're looking at programmatically at the data. So the data request that Director Sinai made is spot on. But that's part of that kind of programmatic evaluation that I think we still need to build out in the slides that you presented today, Director Sinclair. And the Heritage program idea, I think when we get into Heritage programs and admissions policy and change in admissions policy, just being able to clearly articulate to the public, there are things that will fit into the policy committee's work. And I know that President Alper and I are working on some of those admissions related concerns. But publicly being able to delineate what's inside the plan, what's outside the plan, and how it'll be addressed, so that it doesn't feel, at least from the parent perspective, right, like those issues are getting ignored. We hear you, we acknowledge you, but this is the venue at district that will address these issues. So I think that's why it's important to have a robust community engagement process kind of at the beginning too, before even the facilitation happens. If the facilitation is happening later, in the 2nd semester, it's important that we just kind of build consensus on the main issues and where are we going to deal with all the issues that are not going necessarily to be folded into the plan, admissions, right? So things like that, I just want to make sure that it doesn't feel like the district's not listening to those parental concerns, but that the plan is to address it, through this venue or through that venue.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, I just want to make one quick comment, and then maybe we'll have a motion. I really appreciate the work and the presentation and these comments from my colleagues. I was involved as a parent in the a little bit in the creation of the 2013 master plan, and I know from experience with this kind of plan and other kind of plans that sometimes we can put so much effort into the plan that by the time the plan is finished and approved, everyone's so exhausted that there's no more will to actually implement what has been worked on for the last year. And so I appreciate the sort of focus on the funding that's necessary, and then a real implementation plan, so that when we finally approve the plan as a board, that's the beginning, and then we actually implement this vision that we're coming up with. Anyway, I just want to make that quick comment. Is there, Director Babbitt, you wanted to make a motion earlier. Do you want to make it now? You're muted. Yes, no?
Sure. I move to approve this action so that we can get this consultant and get this English master plan started, and then get it implemented, most importantly.
Okay, there's a motion then to approve the staff recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Director Vasudev. Ms. Chires, can you call the roll?
Absolutely. Director Miller,
Yes.
Director Babbitt,
Yes.
Director Vasudev,
Yes.
Director Sinai,
Yes.
Vice President Brown,
Is absent.
that's right, and President Alper.
Yes. All right. Director Sinclair, Associate Superintendent Tiara, thank you so much. All right. We're going to have our final public comment period, and then board members and Assistant Superintendent Tobias Espinoza. We will be recessing back into closed session to continue our discussion about negotiations after this. Ms. Chires is going to send us all a new link as soon as we recess from open session. So check your email after public comment. If you'd like to give a public comment, now is the time to raise your hand so we can figure out how much time we can give. I'm going to give you a couple more seconds to raise your hand. Oh, and I'll keep track of time because Vice President Brown is not still with us tonight. Okay, we have time. We have 15 minutes allotted for this, and there's 7 people, so we're going to give people 2 minutes each. And there are 7 people with their hands raised up. So we're going to start with Tammy Eldridge.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. My name is Tammy, and I have a kindergartner at Malcolm X. He's been blessed to have attended preschool at King CDC and TK at Malcolm X. My husband and I are grateful for his 2 teachers this year in kindergarten who we know care about him. However, we are leaving the district and starting him in private school. When he came to me a couple of weeks ago with big tears running down his cheeks, he asked me to hold him and said, "I can't do it anymore, Mom. I can't do the computer anymore." It's said that safety is our main concern, but what about mental health safety? Is it not as important as physical health, but not treated as such in BUSD? I'm baffled that our children are not seen as essential in needing to be cared for. I have a friend whose husband was being treated for chemotherapy, and she still was required, cancer, and she was still required to go to work at Alta Bates as a nurse to save lives. Are we not in the business of saving lives? Are we not in the business of saving children's lives? If we answer yes to this, then we must require that the teachers go back to school. And then my husband's right here. Can he share or no?
You have 30 seconds left.
Oh, 30 seconds. Okay. Sorry, honey.
I don't know how all the powers that be who are not in favor of opening schools immediately can look themselves in the mirror or sleep at night. You have shown by your actions that opening schools is not your highest priority by insisting it is not yet safe to do so, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Your actions contradict your rhetoric. Private schools have opened and public schools around the country have opened, and yet BUSD is not opening. And the reason this is because of the unions, the all-powerful unions. I'm being cut off here, and I've waited a couple hours to say this. So I just like to say this, that I think that we teach our children when they're growing up to do the right thing. And I think that it almost seems as though those are empty words, that we teach our children to do the right thing, but we as adults are not doing the right thing.
Thank you.
And our words are empty. And I just think we have to step up to the plate, as Mrs. Babbitt has said in the past, and be our brother's keeper and do what's best for our children in a world of hurt. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Marco Ribeiro Arau. Marco. Liz.
Yes, I'm promoting him to a panelist so he could speak, so he should be able to. Speak. Marco, can you hear me?
There he is.
There he is.
You're on mute, Marco.
There you go.
All right. So my name is Marco. I'm a 10th grade student at Berkeley High School. Just like to say a few quick with this. By all means, I'm no expert in COVID-19 or any of these crazy things that have been going on, but speaking from my experience as a student team, and not only that, the general statistics that have come from these lockdowns, I think that as many of the people who have discussed their concern, it's eminently necessary to open all schools as soon as possible. And I've heard things from this panel for the past 8 hours that it's not possible to do this and this and this, but I really just think that you guys are selling yourself short here. I really appreciate that Babbitt has been more oriented. When I heard talk, she mentioned how we could get the soap for the school bathrooms, and I think that approach, this solution directly, should be taken for all of our problems that we're having at USD. Not only that, I think that we may face problems with making sure that schools are safe when they open up. The overwhelming data shows, many of the other people have said, that opening up schools is saving more lives than it is shutting them down. And despite what the school unions say, we as citizens have legitimate right to school. As taxpayers, we paid for our schooling, so by simply violating our rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco. And we had a little bit of trouble hearing you, so you're always welcome to email the board at boardofed@berkeley.net so we can hear all of your comments. I think we got kind of the gist, but you were broken up there for a little bit. But thank you so much for sticking with us. Next, we have JD, followed by Sarah Bowles.
Hi, this is Jamila Dunn. I am calling, after an exhausting meeting. I mean, this was just like just a terrible use of time. Honestly, I've been sitting here for hours, sitting through reports and reports and reports. Does anybody care about kids? Honestly, I'm asking the question. If you care about being genuinely engaged, then genuinely engage with families and students. What outreach is being done to hear the stories of people who are hardest hit by this pandemic in your district. You say that you just want to blow off people who you assume are white, who you assume are privileged economically. I think it's a cop-out. If any of the last surveys are reflective of the effort the district puts out to listen to people, it is pathetic. And then I just want to ask all of you to check your privilege. Do you still have your job and your full income? Do you still have your health insurance? Do you have housing security? Do you have food security? Because many of us don't. And a lot of that is correlated with race and ethnicity, and a lot of it is not. So please take this BS talk about equity and ethnicity and diversity out of the conversation and focus on kids. A very close friend of my son is homeless. He is not in ed camp because he attends Thousand Oaks, which is not an ed camp campus. That false construct is completely missing the point of who needs help. And then you get to ed camp, and what's happening there in reality? Video games. Seriously. The people running ed camps are not only allowing kids to play video games between their classes, they're teaching first graders how to Google and find video games as if they need more screen time. I mean, it's pathetic what BUSD is doing here. And it's not okay for you guys to sit around like talking heads just saying, we need to hear from a more diverse constituent. Reach out and listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bowles, Sarah Bowles.
Hey, wow, about what Jamila said. You definitely need to look into the ed camp issue urgently. So I'm sure you're aware of today's announcement by Alameda County of Education that it's going to start working with County Public Health starting February 8th on its FEMA-led super vaccination site. The key thing that I think the community needs to know is that they intend to prioritize vaccination of education workers who are currently providing direct instruction and services to students. So that's for private schools and public schools. Because there are 325,000 people who are in phase 1B in Alameda County, that means BUSD teachers who are not actually at school sites are going to be last in line behind 325,000 people. So the cohort staff, they can queue up to get vaccinated, and that's awesome. They should be. But I now understand why Matt Meyer was so leisurely in his comments to the community tonight. He's happy to wait behind 325,000 people, which is obviously going to take months. I mean, the reality check is Berkeley has injected around 1,900 vaccines now in February. So how many months is it going to take to grind through 325,000 people? The CDC said today that vaccination was not necessary for schools to open because schools are essentially safe based on the evidence. So I don't understand why we're continuously indulging the fear mongering in BFT. I mean, we love our teachers, but BFT as a union is a whole other entity that deserves legitimate criticism here.
Thank you, Ms. Bowles. Next, we have Hasmi Minassian, followed by Martha Acevedo, and then the last speaker will be Deborah Simon Weisberg. Ms. Minassian.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. I edited my comments in like a minute, so they're a little choppy, but I think you'll get the gist. My name is Hasmi Minassian. I'm a teacher, a parent, and an aunt at Berkeley High School. Like most of my colleagues, I've stayed largely silent in public about school reopening because I haven't wanted to pretend that I'm a public health expert. When smoke from local fires shut down our schools 2 years ago, we were all glued to colors and numbers on our iPhones that told us it was safe to return or not. None of us pretended to understand the first thing about particulate matter or air quality. We worried maybe, but we left when they told us to leave, and we returned when they told us to return. Most teachers know they are not, nor pretend to be public health experts. The power of a teachers union is that we speak with one voice. Our leaders near impossible job is to gather the opinions of their very diverse workforce and negotiate on our behalf. And behind that one union voice in this district are over 1,000 teachers' voices, each holding a slightly more nuanced risk comfort level than the other when it comes to returning to school. From the perspective of the high school, let me offer one main concern that does fall into my area of expertise. You've noticed that some of our young people take advantage of their anonymity at Berkeley High and the large size to overpower adults who are asking them to stay in their lanes. I'm talking specifically about Spirit Week or Senior Streak or any given day that we're just even asking kids to put their phones away. And a very small but mighty number of them are further emboldened by their parents who defend their behaviors when we try to apply consequences. Some of us at Berkeley High are asking, how will parents help the high school enforce rules around masks and social distancing when the kids are non-compliant? I will tell you that today I took what was probably my 6th or 7th survey since school closure, asking me about my willingness to go back. My opinion hasn't changed much since the beginning. Contrary to the teacher versus parent narrative, and like many of my colleagues, I said yes. Yes, I will go back to school when public health approves it, like they have now. Yes, I'm ready to return to a classroom once the buildings have been inspected as per the dashboard indices. Yes, I prefer to have the vaccine, but it's not necessary. I reject the teacher versus parent narrative. I reject the analogies of teachers holding students or this process hostage. And though I understand it's easy to see the negotiations as one big army of teachers against school reopening, I'd ask you to rise to the challenge of seeing a few more shades of gray. It will really help us all stay on one side for the kids against the ongoing negative impacts of this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Manassian. Martha Acevedo, followed by our last speaker, Deborah Simon Weisberg.
My name is Martha Acevedo. I am a former school board director of the Berkeley Unified School District. My topic and the topic I would like to address, the master plan for English language learners. I was very gratified to hear that the DLAC, the District English Language Advisory Committee, continues to be I believe, the legal overseer of the master plan. I hope that as well, experienced teachers, administrators, experience with ELL students, as well as parents around the district of different language groups will be considered and consulted in the process. I look forward to especially being involved and overseeing as a community member. I have 2 daughters that attended Berkeley schools, and I have an adult granddaughter that now lives in Berkeley, and we're interested in being part of that master plan as members of the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and it's wonderful to have you back at the school
Thank
board.
you.
Former Director Acevedo, who was a school board member when I was a Berkeley High student many years ago. Our last speaker is Deborah Simon Weisberg. Ms. Simon Weisberg?
Oh, hi, unmute. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can, thank you.
Great, thank you so much for giving me some time to speak. My name is Deborah Simon Weisberg, and I'm a family physician. I work at Lifelong Medical Care. I was glad to see that our organization was mentioned earlier as a supportive organization in the community for our homeless students. I'm calling in just to make some comments about what you said, President Alpert, about the proposed hybrid model being inevitable, specifically because of the physical distancing requirement. And I just wanted to bring your attention to a letter that we sent about 130 local healthcare professionals sent in yesterday. I hope that you all received that. And we wanted to highlight the requirement of the 6 feet not being what California Department of Public Health is recommending as the minimum spacing. And we really want you to look at that and work with experts, the district to work with experts in the area to see how can we be most creative and allow the most children into in-person school. So I wanted to just bring this up as a very important point because the hybrid model is, I think, a point that all parents and teachers can come together on as something that is really not tenable for students and teachers, especially working families, to bring their kids back and forth and to continue remote learning required for families who do want their kids in person. The hybrid model is really not a tenable prospect for anybody. So I really wanted to make sure that everybody on the school board does pay attention to the letter that we drafted, and that 130 local healthcare professionals, pediatricians, family docs, all types of specialists in our area, mental health experts have all supported, to really make sure that we bring some urgency to bringing our kids back into school and use some creative options and really work with the health experts to determine how to safely bring the kids back into school, and which is about 4 feet spacing between students' chairs.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I forgot to give you the 15-second warning, but thank you, Dr. Simon Weisberg.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We're now going to recess back into closed session. And I believe Ms. Chires is going to email us a new link for that. So thank you all. We'll now recess to closed session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, Director Miller.
See you guys.